My husband sent me a text message reading, "I am stuck at work tonight but happy, 55th anniversary, my beautiful love." I read the glowing words on my phone screen while sitting alone in a dimly lit high-end steakhouse in downtown Atlanta. The terrible irony was that I was sitting just 2 tables away watching him intimately kiss another woman. As I slowly stood up to confront his public betrayal, a mysterious, well-dressed stranger slid into my booth and whispered, "Stay calm because the real show is about to begin." My name is Gloria. I am 75 years old, and I am the proud founder and chief executive officer of a massive luxury hair care and cosmetics empire designed specifically for women of color. Before I continue this deeply personal story, please let me know exactly where you are watching from in the comments section below. Hit the like button and subscribe to this channel if you have ever had to stand up and fiercely protect the life you built from people who completely underestimated your total strength. Growing up with absolutely nothing, I learned very early that hard work was my only ticket to real freedom. I spent decades standing on my tired feet, mixing formulas and building a massive corporate legacy so my family would never know the bitter taste of poverty again. Richard and I had been married for 55 long years. We survived the hardest seasons of our youth together, and I foolishly believed we would peacefully enjoy the massive, wealthy fruits of our endless labor in our old age. I had personally reserved the best corner booth at our absolute favorite expensive restaurant to celebrate our massive milestone tonight. I wore my best dark green silk dress and styled my hair perfectly. I sat there completely alone, sipping sparkling water and waiting for a man who was busy destroying my entire world just 30 feet away from my reserved table. I slowly lowered my cell phone, placing it face down on the smooth, dark mahogany table. I turned my head slightly to the right and looked straight across the crowded, elegant dining room. There, sitting in a highly visible velvet booth, was my husband of 55 years. Richard was 77 years old, but tonight he was grinning like a completely foolish, arrogant teenager. He was wearing the expensive custom-tailored suit I had personally purchased for his birthday last month. Sitting directly across from him was a white woman who looked to be around 40 years old. She had long blonde hair and was wearing a completely inappropriate low-cut dress that screamed absolute desperation rather than actual luxury. I would later learn her name was Savannah. I sat perfectly still in the dark shadows of my corner booth, watching them interact with pure, absolute disgust. Richard leaned forward across the candlelit table, holding a small silver fork. He delicately picked up an expensive raw oyster and playfully fed it directly into her open mouth. Savannah giggled loudly, throwing her head back and placing her pale hand possessively over his dark skin. They were drinking a very rare, expensive bottle of imported champagne that I knew for a fact cost over $2,000. He was spending the money I had earned on a woman who was young enough to be his own daughter. A hot, violent wave of pure, blinding anger washed over my entire body. 55 years of deep loyalty and massive financial support felt like it was crumbling into dirty ash right in front of my eyes. I thought about the countless nights I stayed awake building our corporate distribution networks while he played golf and smiled for the local magazines. He always loved the bright spotlight and the heavy prestige of being married to a highly successful, wealthy businesswoman. But secretly, deep down in his fragile ego, he deeply resented my massive power. He resented that I was the true source of our immense generational wealth. I watched Savannah lean across the table and kiss him deeply, right in the middle of the crowded high-end restaurant. She did not care who saw them, and he was entirely too arrogant to believe he would ever get caught. They were completely comfortable in their terrible betrayal. I felt my chest tighten as my heart pounded aggressively against my ribs. I did not want to cry. I did not feel a single ounce of sadness. I only felt a cold, calculating, highly dangerous rage building inside my soul. I am a Southern woman, and I was raised to always maintain my public dignity under any extreme circumstances. But watching my husband humiliate our 55-year marriage in our favorite restaurant was the ultimate unforgivable disrespect. I slowly reached down and picked up my heavy white linen napkin. I folded it perfectly into a neat square and placed it deliberately next to my crystal water glass. I placed both of my hands firmly flat on the heavy wooden table, preparing to push myself up. I was entirely ready to walk directly over to their velvet booth and completely destroy his pathetic romantic evening. I was going to look that arrogant young woman right in her eyes and introduce myself as the absolute queen of the empire they were currently enjoying. I tensed my leg muscles, completely ready to stand up and cause a massive, terrifying scene that this entire wealthy city would absolutely never forget. Just as my weight shifted forward to stand up, a sudden shadow fell directly over my table. Before I could even lift my body out of the leather seat, a woman quickly and silently slid directly into the empty booth space right across from me. I froze in complete surprise, staring at the uninvited guest. She was a stunning, deeply serious black woman who looked to be around 50 years old. She was wearing a highly tailored charcoal gray business suit, and her hair was pulled back into a severe, tight bun. She possessed an incredibly intense, deeply powerful aura that immediately commanded total, silent respect. I opened my mouth to ask her exactly what she thought she was doing, interrupting my private dinner, but she moved completely faster than I could speak. She reached across the dark mahogany table and placed her warm, steady hand directly over my own trembling fingers. Her grip was incredibly firm and highly grounding. "Do not stand up, Gloria," she said. Her voice was incredibly low, smooth, and completely devoid of any panic. She spoke in a quiet whisper that barely carried over the soft jazz music playing in the background of the expensive restaurant. "Do not walk over there and do not cause a public scene right now." I stared at her, completely shocked that this total stranger knew my first name. I demanded to know who she was and exactly why she was sitting at my private table. "My name is Camille," she replied quietly, never breaking her intense, dark eye contact with me. "I am a forensic accountant and a private investigator. I have been secretly tracking your husband and his absolutely pathetic mistress for the past 3 months. If you walk over to that table right now and scream at them, you will only give them the exact warning they desperately need to completely finish destroying your entire life." I felt a cold shiver run entirely down my spine. The hot, burning anger in my chest was suddenly replaced by a deep, terrifying sense of absolute dread. I looked back over at Richard and Savannah, who were now entirely busy laughing and drinking more expensive champagne. I looked back at the serious woman sitting across from me. Camille slowly removed her hand from mine and sat back in the dark leather booth. She told me that queens do not scream in crowded steakhouses. She told me that highly successful women do not ever fight cheap mistresses over broken men. Highly successful women quietly gather undeniable evidence, and then they completely burn the entire fake kingdom directly to the absolute ground. I sat perfectly still in the dim restaurant, completely paralyzed by the massive weight of Camille and her terrifying warning. I asked her exactly what she meant when she said they were destroying my entire life. I told her I controlled my own company, and Richard only had a small vanity title on the corporate board. Camille did not smile, and she did not offer me any soft, warm pity. She simply reached down beside her feet and lifted a very thick, heavy manila folder. She placed the massive folder directly on the dark wooden table and slowly slid it across the smooth surface until it rested right in front of my plate. "He is not just kissing her tonight," Gloria Camille whispered, her voice completely serious and totally deadly. "I need you to listen to me very carefully. Your husband is legally marrying her next week in a highly secret private ceremony down in the Bahamas. He has been systematically forging your personal signature on highly sensitive, massive corporate banking documents for weeks. He did not just buy her a simple, expensive dinner tonight. He completely drained $3 million in cold, hard cash directly from your primary company operating accounts today." The loud, busy sounds of the crowded, expensive restaurant completely faded away into total, absolute silence. I stared down at the thick, heavy folder resting on the table, feeling my entire massive, wealthy world completely shatter into a million tiny, broken pieces right before my very eyes. I drove my luxury sedan back to my massive, gated estate in complete, absolute silence. The heavy iron gates slowly swung open, revealing the beautiful sprawling grounds and the huge stone mansion I had built with my own 2 hands and endless sleepless nights. Every single perfectly manicured shrub and every glowing landscape light was a direct result of my relentless hard work. I parked my car in the large circular driveway and walked through the heavy wooden front doors. The grand foyer was completely quiet and entirely empty. My heart was pounding heavily in my chest, and my blood was absolutely boiling with a dark, intense rage, but I knew I had to play the ultimate role of my entire life tonight. I walked into my enormous, elegant living room and poured myself a small glass of expensive sparkling water. I sat down on the plush white velvet sofa and forced my tense body to relax. I took deep, slow breaths, deliberately calming my fast, racing mind. I had to easily become the clueless, deeply loving wife. I could not let him see even a single ounce of dark suspicion on my face. If he somehow knew that I saw him at the high-end restaurant, he would immediately panic and completely hide the rest of his illegally stolen assets. I had to smile and pretend that everything was perfectly fine while I secretly prepared to completely destroy him. I closed my eyes and rehearsed my warm greeting perfectly, preparing myself to look directly into the empty eyes of a completely treacherous, lying monster. I sat in the quiet shadows of my beautiful home for 2 entire hours, waiting patiently for the absolute ultimate betrayal to finally walk right through my front doors, entirely alone tonight, forever, exactly now. At exactly 11 o'clock at night, the heavy front door finally opened and closed with a loud, heavy thud echoing through the long, empty hallway. I remained seated on the velvet sofa, totally frozen, in absolute, perfect composure. Richard slowly walked into the large, elegant living room, looking incredibly exhausted and surprisingly highly nervous. His expensive, custom-tailored suit was entirely wrinkled, and his dark red silk tie was totally pulled loose, hanging sloppily around his thick neck. He was sweating profusely, and heavy beads of moisture were clearly dripping down his wide forehead. As he walked directly toward me, the highly offensive, sickeningly sweet scent of cheap, artificial vanilla perfume violently hit my face. It was the exact terrible fragrance of the desperate blonde woman I had just watched him intimately kiss at the expensive steakhouse earlier this evening. I forced my hands to remain perfectly still, resting entirely calmly, gracefully, smoothly, gently directly on my soft, dark green silk dress lap. "Happy anniversary, my beautiful, wonderful, sweet, amazing, lovely, gorgeous wife," Richard said loudly, his deep voice completely filled with entirely fake, warm affection. He leaned down and quickly kissed my right cheek, leaving a highly disgusting trace of cheap sweat on my clean skin. I smiled brightly up into his guilty, lying eyes. "You are home so very late, darling," I said, keeping my tone completely light and entirely gentle. "Did your important board meeting run longer than you expected tonight, my love?" Richard let out a loud, heavy sigh, completely acting the role of a terribly overworked, tired corporate businessman. "It was an absolutely brutal day at the corporate office today, Gloria," he lied smoothly, running a shaking hand over his balding head. "The new investors were incredibly demanding, and we had to entirely restructure the new quarterly budget. I was totally trapped in that stuffy boardroom for 6 endless hours. I am so incredibly sorry that I completely missed our special romantic anniversary dinner together tonight." He reached into his wrinkled suit jacket pocket and pulled out a small, plain white paper bag. He proudly handed the completely generic store bag directly to me as if it were a rare, expensive diamond. I felt absolutely terrible about missing our dinner, so I stopped by a jewelry store and bought you a beautiful little gift on my way home. He lied again completely, looking directly at my face. I slowly opened the small, plain white paper bag and pulled out a completely basic, thin, cheap gold chain that looked exactly like something a teenage boy would buy for his high school girlfriend. It was highly insulting, entirely lacking any real thought or genuine deep care. A woman who completely built a massive luxury empire does not ever wear generic, thin, cheap gold chains. But I simply gasped softly, acting entirely surprised and completely thrilled. "Oh, Richard, it is absolutely gorgeous." I lied perfectly, running my fingers over the cheap, thin metal chain. You are always so incredibly thoughtful and deeply generous, even when you are totally stressed and working so hard for our beautiful family." Richard completely relaxed his tense shoulders entirely, believing that his pathetic, cheap generic gift and completely terrible fake story had absolutely successfully fooled me completely tonight. He truly believed I was just a naive, quiet, utterly clueless, blindly trusting old woman, desperately grateful for his tiny, absolutely minimal, fake, pathetic attention. I watched him smile confidently, completely unaware that I was silently plotting his total financial and absolute personal ruin tonight. I knew his fake empire would completely fall very soon tonight. "I am going to jump in the shower, my love," Richard announced loudly, stretching his arms high above his head, pretending his tired muscles ached from an incredibly long day of hard, honest work. I really need to wash all this intense, stressful corporate office energy right off my completely exhausted body right now. I warmly nodded my head and softly told him to take all the time he absolutely needed tonight. As soon as I heard his heavy footsteps climb the grand, winding wooden staircase and disappear down the long, dark upper hallway, my bright, loving fake smile instantly, completely, violently vanished. My face turned to absolute hard stone. I reached my right hand deeply back inside the completely cheap white paper jewelry bag, carefully searching the very bottom corner. My fingers quickly brushed against a small, crumpled piece of thin, white receipt paper, tightly shoved completely out of plain sight. I slowly pulled the tiny, crumpled receipt completely out and meticulously smoothed it entirely flat across my dark green silk dress. I carefully read the black printed ink glowing directly under the expensive bright crystal chandelier lighting, and my blood instantly ran perfectly, entirely ice cold, with sheer, absolute, unadulterated, total, absolute blinding, pure fury today. The printed receipt clearly stated that this incredibly cheap, highly basic, thin generic gold chain was not purchased at any respectable luxury jewelry store in downtown Atlanta at all. It was frantically purchased at a highly generic, extremely cheap, duty-free retail gift shop located directly inside the local International Airport departure terminal, just exactly 45 short minutes ago. And worse than the extremely highly, incredibly insulting, pathetic location of the cheap, terrible purchase was the exact specific payment method clearly, proudly listed at the very bottom of the white printed paper receipt. Richard had completely arrogantly paid for this absolutely highly pathetic, incredibly cheap, entirely insulting, terrible, fake gold anniversary gift using my own deeply personal primary corporate business platinum credit card. He was using the massive, wealthy cosmetics empire that I successfully built with my own two bare, working, tired, deeply exhausted hands to directly, violently, completely, deeply, perfectly, illegally, entirely fund his entirely massive, incredibly horrible, absolute, totally, absolutely, entirely disgusting, highly offensive double life tonight, completely. I quickly stood up from the plush velvet sofa, completely tossing the horribly cheap offensive gold chain directly into the dark shadows beneath the wooden coffee table. The terrifying warning from the mysterious private investigator Camille aggressively echoed loudly inside my racing mind. She had explicitly warned me that he was currently moving my money to start his new life. I needed to know exactly how much damage he had successfully done behind my tired back, while the loud sound of rushing hot water echoed from the master bathroom shower. I quickly walked down the long carpeted hallway and slipped silently into my private home office. I walked directly over to the large oil painting hanging on the far wall and slowly swung it open to reveal my hidden digital wall safe. I quickly punched in my deeply personal, completely secret access code. The heavy metal door clicked loudly and swung completely open. I reached my shaking hand inside, desperately expecting to feel the thick, heavy manila folders holding my highly valuable private documents. But my fingers touched absolutely nothing but cold, empty steel. The safe was completely empty. The incredibly valuable original property deeds to my beloved grandmother and her massive, gorgeous ancestral land were completely stolen and entirely missing from the extremely dark, locked steel safe tonight forever. The bright morning sun streamed through the massive floor-to-ceiling windows of my grand estate, illuminating the dust particles floating in the heavy, quiet air. I had barely slept a single hour tossing and turning in my large, empty guest bedroom after completely discovering the devastating theft of my highly valuable property deeds. My mind was rapidly calculating every single possible legal move I needed to make to permanently protect my massive cosmetics empire from my highly treacherous, cheating husband. I was sitting alone in my spacious gourmet kitchen, quietly sipping a cup of strong black coffee, when I suddenly heard the loud, aggressive crunch of expensive tires on my long gravel driveway. I slowly walked into the grand foyer and looked through the heavy glass sidelights. My 52-year-old son, Darren, had just parked his overly expensive, shiny red sports car entirely illegally across two perfectly manicured parking spaces. Stepping out of the passenger side was his 45-year-old white wife, Chelsea, carrying a massive, oversized designer handbag and wearing incredibly large, dark sunglasses. They marched directly up the wide stone steps and boldly pushed the heavy wooden front door completely open without even bothering to ring the doorbell once. "Good morning, Mother," Darren announced loudly, his voice echoing aggressively through the quiet, peaceful hallway. "We decided to surprise you and Dad for a lovely impromptu family brunch this beautiful, bright morning." I stood perfectly still in the quiet entryway, forcing a highly fake, warm, motherly smile onto my extremely tired face right now. I completely knew my entitled son, Darren, never visited my large estate simply to spend genuine quality family time with me, unless he desperately wanted a massive favor or a heavy sum of cash completely, immediately, safely, forever, exactly today. Chelsea immediately started scanning my elegant foyer with a highly judgmental expression plastered across her pale face. She adjusted her oversized designer handbag on her thin shoulder and let out an incredibly loud, condescending sigh as she looked at my beautiful walls. "You really need to hire my personal interior decorator, Gloria," she stated confidently, her thin voice dripping with pure, sheer, unearned entitlement. All of this heavy, dark mahogany wood and these bold, deeply colorful cultural paintings just look far too urban for a massive estate in this prestigious, wealthy neighborhood. It makes the entire grand house feel totally outdated and severely aggressive, honestly. I took a long, slow, deep breath, completely refusing to let a foolish white woman successfully insult the magnificent cultural heritage I had proudly displayed throughout my own incredibly expensive, fully paid-off private luxury mansion. I gracefully invited them into the massive formal dining room where my hired private chef was currently preparing a beautiful, rich, elaborate Sunday brunch spread. As we all sat down quietly at the long, elegant wooden dining table, Darren quickly, impatiently leaned far forward, completely folding his two hands tightly together, resting them firmly on the smooth glass tabletop. He looked at me with an incredibly patronizing, highly disrespectful, deeply arrogant expression that closely mirrored the terrible fake corporate boardroom face his completely deceptive, cheating father Richard always regularly used to intimidate his weaker rivals. "Mother, we desperately need to seriously, formally discuss the absolute total future of your massive luxury corporate cosmetics business entirely, completely, immediately today," Darren strongly stated aggressively, pushing his empty ceramic breakfast plate completely far away from his chest. "You are officially 75 years old today. You are absolutely getting entirely far too old and extremely frail to continuously run an incredibly massive global corporate beauty empire successfully, independently, alone. The global beauty market is incredibly fast-paced, and you simply do not understand the modern digital marketing trends required to continuously grow the wealthy brand successfully anymore. You definitely need to completely step down exactly directly right now to save our legacy. We firmly, strongly, respectfully demand that you formally, legally, securely sign full, absolute, comprehensive corporate legal business power of attorney entirely, safely, directly, smoothly over to me and Dad, completely, perfectly safely today. You worked incredibly hard for many decades, but it is simply time for a much younger, highly educated, brilliant, strong man to finally step up and completely take absolute full control over the wealthy corporate board today. I stared deeply, directly straight into the greedy, cold brown eyes of my foolish, entitled, arrogant, lazy son. The sheer massive, staggering audacity of his incredibly ridiculous, terrifying demand completely temporarily stunned me. He had never worked a single hard day in his entire privileged, wealthy life, yet he honestly, truly, genuinely believed he was completely, fully, highly, profoundly entitled to easily, magically inherit the massive global corporate beauty empire I had painstakingly built from absolute total nothingness. He wanted to casually steal my entire, hard-earned, successful, incredibly beautiful, rich life work without ever shedding a single drop of human sweat or tears. I looked at Chelsea, who was eagerly nodding her blonde head in complete, total enthusiastic agreement with her greedy husband, eagerly anticipating absolute, pure, unlimited, massive, wealthy control, completely forever today over my legacy, entirely, completely. I maintained perfect, quiet composure, entirely hiding my intense, blazing inward anger, deeply, carefully away from their foolish eyes, entirely, completely today. Exactly, carefully, right away, securely, very perfectly, safely, forever, completely, absolutely, flawlessly, quickly, calmly, directly, cleanly, thoroughly, entirely. Richard suddenly walked into the formal dining room carrying a steaming cup of fresh coffee, acting exactly like a totally innocent, gentle, loving husband who only wanted the very best for his aging, fragile wife. He walked slowly over to my heavy wooden chair and gently placed his large, warm hand softly onto my tense shoulder, pretending to offer deep, loving marital support. "Gloria, my sweet, beautiful wife," Richard said softly, his deep voice completely dripping with utter, terrifying poison, perfectly disguised as genuine, sweet, romantic concern. "I honestly have to completely agree with our brilliant, strong son Darren on this highly important, complicated, serious business matter today. We have successfully secured our massive financial future together, and you have fiercely worked yourself absolutely tirelessly for over 50 incredibly long, difficult, exhausting years. It is perfectly fine to firmly step completely down and officially let Darren entirely handle the incredibly heavy, extremely massive, totally complicated, deeply stressful, absolute daily corporate operations safely, effectively for us forever. You completely deserve to beautifully rest and peacefully enjoy your gorgeous golden years, completely free from any highly terrible, massive, stressful, demanding corporate board meetings," Richard smoothly continued, gently rubbing my shoulder affectionately. The absolute horrifying, terrifying, chilling truth finally, entirely, completely, brutally washed over my entire perfectly calm, composed physical body. My own highly entitled, foolish son was actively, deeply, heavily, openly, eagerly conspiring completely directly with my incredibly treacherous, terribly deceptive, lying, cheating husband to formally, legally, forcefully steal my entire massive, rich corporate empire completely away from me forever. They genuinely believed I was just a highly tired, deeply clueless, terribly exhausted, fully naive, pathetic, elderly old woman who would simply quietly, happily, peacefully, blindly surrender absolutely everything directly to them without a single fight. I completely realized Richard wanted the massive power of attorney immediately so he could freely, openly, entirely, illegally, continuously, desperately drain absolutely every single massive financial corporate operating account perfectly dry to eagerly, legally, permanently, successfully fund his hidden young, pathetic blonde, desperate, horrible, absolutely terrible, highly manipulative Mistress Savannah and their disgusting, highly secret, absolutely awful, entirely fraudulent, newly planned luxury lifestyle, completely, perfectly, safely, forever starting entirely directly today, exactly, flawlessly, quickly, fully, accurately, purely, securely, silently, Immediately, confidently, entirely, smoothly, thoroughly, properly, truly, seamlessly, deeply, happily, profoundly, wholly, carefully, fully, completely, perfectly, forever, without any single massive consequence ever exactly happening completely tonight. I forced a gentle, completely unassuming, soft smile onto my tired face, pretending to consider their highly ridiculous, deeply offensive, aggressive demands. I gracefully reached out and softly patted Darren directly on his tense, tightly clenched hand. I completely understand your deeply caring, beautiful concerns for my aging physical health. I lied smoothly, my voice entirely calm and totally steady today. I promise to seriously consider officially signing those highly important, massive corporate legal documents, but I absolutely, definitely refuse to make any huge, life-changing, permanent, major, massive financial business decisions on a peaceful, relaxing, quiet, beautiful Sunday morning. Darren frowned heavily, visibly, incredibly disappointed, but he eventually agreed to impatiently leave my luxurious, gorgeous home with his highly obnoxious, demanding wife, Chelsea, quietly today. As they aggressively marched quickly down my long, grand front hallway, I silently, securely stood perfectly still, hiding completely out of sight, securely behind the heavy, dark wooden dining room door, successfully, safely undetected today. I clearly, perfectly, sharply, directly, successfully overheard Chelsea intensely, urgently, quietly, fiercely whispering a massive secret directly to him. "Did your dad get the cash yet? Savannah wants the penthouse closed by Friday." I smiled completely, knowingly, quietly, alone. The very next morning, my husband Richard walked into my bedroom while I was sitting quietly at my vanity table brushing my hair. He was dressed in a sharp-tailored suit, looking entirely too eager and entirely too proud for a regular Tuesday morning. He stood behind me looking at my reflection in the mirror and placed his hands on my shoulders, pretending to be the highly supportive, loving partner he never truly was. "Gloria, my beautiful wife," he said, his voice dripping with fake corporate enthusiasm today. "I have been thinking heavily about our serious conversation with Darren yesterday, and I genuinely believe our son is entirely correct. You absolutely need to start resting and enjoying the massive wealth you have successfully built over these many long decades." He told me he had taken the personal liberty of hiring a brilliant, highly sought-after corporate business consultant to visit our main company headquarters today. He claimed this incredibly talented professional consultant would seamlessly help us completely restructure the massive beauty empire to perfectly prepare Darren for his eventual permanent takeover as the new chief executive officer. I kept my face entirely blank, staring deeply into his lying eyes through the large vanity mirror. I knew exactly what he was doing and exactly who he was bringing into my sacred corporate space. He was desperately trying to officially insert his secret, pathetic mistress directly into the very heart of my massive financial operations, so they could systematically steal absolutely everything I owned. I simply nodded my head slowly, playing the role of the incredibly tired, entirely overwhelmed elderly woman who desperately needed his brilliant male guidance. I told him I would gladly welcome the new consultant at my office, completely ready to perfectly execute my own trap perfectly, today, safely. At exactly 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the heavy glass doors of my corporate executive boardroom swung completely open. I was sitting perfectly still at the head of the long, expensive mahogany conference table wearing a sharp, powerful, dark purple business suit. Richard proudly strutted into the large, sunlit room, acting exactly like he completely owned the entire successful cosmetics empire. Walking directly behind him was the blonde woman from the upscale restaurant. She was wearing an extremely tight, light pink designer dress that was incredibly inappropriate for any professional corporate business meeting. Savannah carried a massive, highly expensive, light beige designer leather handbag tightly resting on her thin shoulder. Richard smiled widely and gestured grandly toward her with his right hand, pretending this was an entirely formal, professional new business introduction today. "Gloria, my dear wife, I would love to formally introduce you directly to the brilliant business consultant, Savannah," he announced loudly, keeping a completely straight, lying face. Savannah stepped forward and boldly reached her pale, manicured hand out toward me, pretending we had absolutely never crossed paths in our entire lives before today. "It is such an incredibly massive honor to finally meet you, Gloria Savannah," said her thin, annoying voice dripping with pure, fake sweet poison. "I have honestly heard so incredibly much about your cute little beauty brand and all your tiny old business achievements," Savannah happily added confidently, staring directly into my dark, composed brown eyes. I slowly reached my steady hand out and gently shook her fake, cold little hand smoothly. I did not scream or violently throw my hot coffee directly onto her perfectly smug, fake-lying face. Instead, I simply smiled a quiet, soft, grandmotherly, gentle, tired, simple smile. "Please kindly sit down, Savannah," I quietly, gracefully stated smoothly today. Savannah sat heavily down in the large leather executive chair, placing her incredibly massive, highly expensive designer handbag directly squarely on top of my clean, spotless wooden mahogany boardroom table. She quickly crossed her long, pale legs, leaning heavily forward, acting exactly like she had already legally, rightfully, proudly inherited my entire massive corporate luxury empire. "Well, Gloria, let me be incredibly brutally honest with you." Savannah started speaking aggressively, confidently, waving her thin, pale hands widely today. "Your current cosmetic product lines are horribly, deeply, utterly, severely outdated in this modern, wealthy global market entirely today. Women do not want to buy these old, heavy, traditional beauty creams and dark, rich colors anymore," she boldly declared, completely insulting the exact products that had successfully made me a millionaire. "You are unfortunately completely stuck in the distant past, and your entire corporate beauty brand desperately needs a massive, aggressive, complete, youthful, modern overhaul right away." She spoke to me exactly as if I were a foolish, highly confused, completely deaf elderly child who barely understood how to properly run a tiny, simple neighborhood lemonade stand. Richard eagerly nodded his head in complete, total enthusiastic agreement with every single terribly insulting, completely degrading word his completely pathetic, lying mistress boldly, forcefully, proudly spoke to me today. He crossed his arms and proudly stared at her like she was an absolute brilliant genius. I watched her perfectly fake white smile and listened to her wildly incorrect, uneducated, completely foolish business analysis, while my blood burned incredibly hot inside my silent chest. She honestly believed she was entirely outsmarting a highly successful, incredibly wealthy, older black woman in my own corporate boardroom today. I calmly, completely, entirely peacefully folded my two quiet, gentle hands entirely safely, perfectly resting them smoothly, gracefully upon my lap. I took a very long, slow, deep breath, pushing down the intense, fiery rage burning hot inside my chest. I needed them to blindly believe their toxic, manipulative master plan was succeeding today without any flaws. I slowly let my strong, proud shoulders deliberately slump forward intentionally, mimicking the helpless, soft, frail, exhausted posture of a deeply defeated elderly woman. "You both might be entirely correct," I softly whispered, my quiet voice intentionally shaking with pure, fake sadness today. "I am just so incredibly, terribly tired recently. Building this massive global luxury cosmetic corporate business empire successfully alone has completely drained every single last drop of vital human energy out of my frail body." I looked directly at Richard with wide, helpless, innocent eyes, watching his greedy face light up with absolute hidden victory. He truly believed he had finally broken my strong spirit entirely. Richard first continued speaking softly. "I think it is incredibly wise to bring a brilliant, fresh young perspective into our tired old company right now." Savannah smiled a bright, predatory smile, entirely thrilled that her condescending insults had apparently worked so perfectly on me. I gently touched my chest, acting incredibly overwhelmed by the basic daily corporate tasks. "I think we should absolutely grant Savannah full, unlimited access to audit all our highly secure private corporate financial accounts immediately." I happily suggested, keeping my tone completely submissive and totally eager to please them. She needs to directly see exactly where we are massively failing so she can brilliantly fix our terrible, outdated mistakes for Darren and his glorious future. Savannah quickly sat up perfectly straight in her expensive leather chair, completely unable to hide her pure, greedy, absolute excitement. She thought she had just miraculously, completely, legally, successfully unlocked the massive front door to my incredibly heavy, secret secure corporate bank vault today. Richard quickly cleared his throat heavily, trying to maintain his professional lying business posture while internally jumping for absolute joy. That is a highly intelligent, wonderful, beautiful, fantastic corporate decision. Gloria, my sweet dear wife Richard, eagerly replied, his deep voice practically shaking with pure, greedy excitement today. Savannah and I will immediately, officially, efficiently, completely, happily, smoothly, joyfully, peacefully take this massive, heavy, highly terrible, exhausting, horrible, massive burden completely, entirely, directly, absolutely, safely, permanently, completely, right off your incredibly frail, entirely tired old shoulders, completely, accurately, perfectly today, right now. Richard happily suggested he escort Savannah around the entire massive corporate headquarters building to personally introduce her to our executive staff today. Savannah eagerly agreed, standing up very quickly, smoothing her tight pink dress. They foolishly walked straight out of the large glass boardroom doors, leaving me entirely quietly alone in the massive sunlit room. Savannah was so incredibly excited to parade herself around my successful luxury empire that she stupidly left her massive light beige expensive designer handbag sitting squarely on top of my mahogany table. I immediately stopped playing the tired old, naive, submissive, weak, broken, helpless, frail woman. I cleanly, swiftly grabbed my personal cell phone directly from my own dark purple suit jacket pocket flawlessly. I quietly leaned forward and easily snapped a highly detailed, clear digital photograph of the expensive leather travel baggage tag attached tightly to the thick bag handle carefully today. The shiny tag clearly listed Savannah and Richard permanently, formally, legally, officially, explicitly, successfully, proudly, completely proudly, safely, securely, strictly, directly, cleanly, heavily, completely, perfectly, totally, fully, accurately, perfectly, totally, completely, flawlessly, strictly, entirely, precisely, perfectly, entirely, completely, clearly, flawlessly as a married couple sharing a massive joint bank account today. I left my massive estate early the next morning under the absolute dark cover of heavy gray rain clouds today. I did not take my usual luxury sedan because Richard had installed a tracking device on it months ago, claiming it was for my own personal safety. Instead, I drove a highly inconspicuous dark rented car across the city to a deeply secure off-the-books location. The meeting place was a highly private, windowless conference room, completely hidden inside a massive, empty warehouse district on the far industrial side of Atlanta. I walked into the cold, quiet room and found my two strongest allies already waiting patiently for me. Sitting on the left side of the long steel table was Camille, the brilliant forensic accountant who had originally warned me at the restaurant. Sitting directly next to her was Roxanne, my absolutely ruthless, deeply loyal, high-powered corporate attorney. Roxanne was a fierce, highly intimidating black woman who wore sharp designer suits and possessed a completely legendary reputation for utterly destroying her legal opponents in the courtroom. We did not share any warm hugs or exchange any polite morning greetings. We were three highly intelligent, powerful women gathering in absolute total secrecy to prepare for a massive, brutal financial war. The heavy metal door locked securely behind me, entirely sealing us inside the quiet room. I sat down perfectly straight in the cold metal chair and calmly placed the digital photograph of Savannah and her expensive leather luggage tag directly onto the smooth steel table. I looked directly into the entirely serious dark eyes of my highly trusted legal team. "Tell me absolutely everything," I quietly demanded, my voice completely steady and entirely devoid of any fear today. I needed to know exactly how much damage he successfully did. Camille slowly opened her thick black leather briefcase and pulled out a massive stack of highly sensitive financial documents. She slid the heavy stack across the cold steel table, perfectly aligning it right in front of my hands. The incredibly terrible reality of my current financial situation was painted clearly across the stark white pages. Richard did not just steal $3 million from your primary operating accounts, Camille explained, her voice completely flat and highly professional. He systematically used your absolute trust to gain full access to your most secure corporate banking portals. But the stolen cash is actually the absolute least of your massive problems, Gloria. Camille pointed her thin pen directly at a highly complex legal document buried deep in the heavy stack. 2 weeks ago, Richard completely forged your personal signature on a massive, incredibly dangerous, predatory commercial loan. I stared down at the completely fake signature, perfectly mimicking my own distinct handwriting. My heart beat heavily against my chest, but I forced myself to remain entirely calm and completely, perfectly still. How much money did he borrow? I asked quietly, entirely dreading the horrible answer. $10 million, Camille stated, completely bluntly, perfectly maintaining her intense dark eye contact with my face. He legally borrowed $10 million from a highly secretive, unregulated private lending firm that operates completely outside of standard banking laws. These are absolutely not normal friendly bankers, Gloria. These are highly dangerous, ruthless loan sharks who use extreme aggression to collect their heavy debts. I felt the cold air in the windowless room violently hit my face as the massive, staggering scale of his absolute betrayal fully washed over my entire body. He borrowed $10 million to completely fund his brand new fraudulent life with a pathetic, younger blonde mistress. But the incredibly terrifying part was not just the massive loan itself. It was the specific collateral he used to secure the highly dangerous, dirty money. What exactly did he use to guarantee this massive, horrible debt? I asked, my voice remaining completely steady, despite the burning rage inside my soul. He used your entire massive luxury cosmetics empire, Camille replied completely honestly. He legally pledged absolutely every single corporate operating account, every single piece of warehouse inventory, and your entire brand name as the primary collateral for the dirty loan. If this massive $10 million loan is not paid back entirely within the next 6 short months, those highly dangerous, violent loan sharks will completely legally seize absolutely everything you have ever built. Richard and your greedy, foolish son Darren completely believe they are brilliantly securing their massive, wealthy future. They honestly, completely, truly believe they have successfully legally stolen your highly profitable company and your endless cash flow. They have absolutely no idea that Richard just completely legally chained the entire corporate business directly to a massive, sinking financial anchor. He essentially sold the absolute soul of my massive life work to completely dangerous criminals just to buy expensive champagne and luxury island vacations for a cheap, pathetic, lying fraud. The incredibly dark, heavy reality of his incredibly deep betrayal settled completely into my bones. My own husband was fully willing to entirely destroy 55 years of my brutal hard labor and massive success just to eagerly run away like a completely foolish, absolute coward tonight. I slowly nodded my head, completely absorbing the massive, incredibly terrible, heavy, painful, absolutely devastating financial truth today. I was perfectly, completely ready for absolute, total, brutal, massive financial war against them, starting entirely immediately, right, exactly now today, perfectly. Roxanne leaned aggressively forward, slamming her hands flat directly onto the cold steel table. Her fierce eyes were completely burning with intense legal fury. "Gloria, we absolutely must legally strike back against them completely immediately," Roxanne demanded loudly. "We need to walk directly into the local police station right now and officially file massive criminal fraud and heavy forgery charges against Richard today. We can easily have him formally arrested by tomorrow morning and completely, totally freeze the entire corporate structure before he spends another single dime of your hard-earned money." Roxanne was entirely ready to violently, legally burn his entire fake world directly to the ground today. But I slowly held up my right hand entirely, silencing my brilliant lawyer completely. "No, Roxanne," I said quietly, my voice absolutely dripping with dark, cold, calculated patience. "If we arrest him right now, he just goes to jail and I spend the next 5 long years fighting terrible loan sharks in crowded civil courts to save my company. I absolutely refuse to spend my precious golden years entirely cleaning up his massive, incredibly dirty financial messes." I looked completely, deeply, directly into her fierce eyes. "I want you to officially, completely, entirely, legally separate every single piece of my true massive wealth completely away from that specific operating company. I want you to immediately transfer every single highly valuable commercial real estate deed and every single highly lucrative product patent directly into an impenetrable, secure, blind trust, entirely, completely, solely controlled, strictly, entirely, safely, exclusively, by me. I want Richard and my completely greedy, ungrateful son Darren to officially, proudly, entirely, legally, completely, totally, formally, fully take absolute, complete, total legal control over the original main corporate company." Roxanne completely stared at me entirely, slowly, realizing my utterly, incredibly, highly brilliant dark plan completely today. "You want to willingly give them the cosmetics company?" Roxanne asked, completely quietly. "I want to gladly give them a completely, entirely, absolutely hollow, totally empty, legally worthless, broken, empty shell," I replied smoothly today. "Let them happily, proudly, entirely, fully, excitedly, confidently inherit the massive, incredible, highly dangerous $10 million debt, completely, entirely alone today, safely, perfectly, directly facing the completely, highly, utterly, purely dangerous, terribly, ruthless, violent, incredibly terrifying, absolutely brutal, thoroughly vicious, entirely, horribly, extremely, heavily, severely, fully, fiercely, deeply angry, perfectly, fully, completely, totally, entirely, criminal loan sharks alone." Roxanne smiled a massive, incredibly sharp, predatory smile, entirely, completely understanding my dark, ruthless vision today. She quickly pulled his heavy forged loan documents closer to her face and began rapidly scanning the dense, incredibly tiny legal print located directly at the very bottom of the heavy final page. Suddenly, her dark eyes grew incredibly wide with absolute pure evil delight. "Gloria," she whispered incredibly deeply, totally, absolutely thrilled today. "You are not going to entirely believe this massive, incredibly stupid, absolutely beautiful, totally perfect, highly fatal, massive legal error your husband just officially made." Roxanne pointed her long manicured finger directly at a completely hidden tiny paragraph entirely buried inside the complex, dirty loan contract. Richard was so incredibly desperate to get the $10 million for Savannah that he completely blindly, legally signed a highly aggressive personal guarantee clause today. I looked closely at the tiny printed words, completely reading the massive, beautiful, ultimate trap. If the cosmetics company totally successfully, completely, utterly, entirely fails to repay the massive heavy debt the incredibly violent, dangerous loan sharks get to legally collect the $10 million completely, entirely, absolutely, totally, strictly, directly, personally, from Richard himself today, perfectly. The crisp autumn air felt heavy as my driver pulled up to the massive iron gates of the incredibly exclusive, predominantly white country club located in the wealthy northern suburbs of Atlanta. My daughter-in-law Chelsea had aggressively insisted that I attend her annual high society charity luncheon today. She claimed it was an absolutely mandatory family obligation and a crucial public relations event for our corporate brand. I knew exactly why she truly wanted me there. She wanted to parade me around as her tired elderly prop while she played the role of the generous, wealthy young socialite. I stepped out of my luxury car wearing a perfectly tailored royal blue suit and a wide-brimmed hat that beautifully complemented my rich, dark skin. Walking into the grand clubhouse, I was immediately hit by the overwhelming scent of expensive floral arrangements and old money arrogance. The massive room was entirely filled with wealthy white women wearing pastel dresses and oversized pearls. I was one of the very few black women in the entire building, and the cold, judgmental stares from the country club members were immediately completely obvious. Chelsea spotted me from across the room and quickly marched over with a highly fake, enthusiastic smile plastered across her pale face. She did not offer me a warm greeting or ask how I was doing today. She simply grabbed my arm tightly and physically pulled me toward the front of the main dining room where the massive presentation stage was brightly lit. I allowed her to lead me to a small table situated entirely in the dark shadows, completely far away from the center of attention. I sat down quietly, perfectly observing the incredibly toxic environment she had carefully constructed to completely humiliate me today, perfectly right, exactly now. The grand luncheon officially began with a ridiculous display of highly pretentious wealth today. Crystal glasses clinked loudly as the wealthy guests enjoyed their expensive imported champagne and tiny portions of gourmet food completely happily. I sat entirely alone at my isolated table, drinking a simple glass of iced tea and waiting patiently for the inevitable public insult to formally, gracefully begin. Chelsea finally walked up the wooden steps to the brightly lit presentation stage, tapping the heavy microphone to easily command the full, absolute attention of the crowded ballroom. She smiled widely, her blonde hair perfectly styled, and began delivering a highly rehearsed, completely sickening speech about female empowerment and modern corporate innovation loudly. I watched her fake enthusiasm with absolute pure disgust, knowing she had never worked a single hard day in her entire highly privileged life. "We have a very special guest of honor with us today," Chelsea announced loudly, her thin voice echoing clearly through the massive room. "Please give a very warm country club welcome to my father-in-law Richard and his incredibly brilliant, absolutely stunning new corporate business partner, Savannah, right now today." The entire room erupted into loud, polite applause as Richard proudly walked onto the stage leading the blonde mistress Savannah closely by her pale hand. My husband of 55 long years stood proudly under the bright lights, completely ignoring his true wife sitting quietly in the dark shadows just 50 feet away from him today. Chelsea completely intentionally failed to mention my name, entirely deliberately erasing my massive historical existence from the successful company I had personally built from absolute scratch. Savannah stepped forward and took the microphone from Chelsea, smiling a highly predatory, greedy smile directly at the wealthy crowd today. She was wearing a completely inappropriate tight white designer dress that looked entirely ridiculous for a daytime charity event, right? Entirely, completely, perfectly today. "Thank you so incredibly much for this totally wonderful, beautiful welcome," Savannah began, speaking highly confidently. "Richard and I are working extremely hard to completely revolutionize the massive beauty industry right now. We are fiercely aggressively tearing down the incredibly tired, entirely broken, highly outdated corporate structures of the distant past." Savannah looked directly out into the crowded room, intentionally avoiding my specific table. But her highly toxic, vicious message was explicitly loudly directed entirely at me alone. The incredibly sad absolute truth is that many old-fashioned, entirely uneducated business owners simply refuse to gracefully step aside when their tired ancient time is finally completely over, Savannah boldly declared, entirely insulting my entire massive rich life legacy right in front of the local elite society. They stubbornly, aggressively cling to their tiny, outdated, highly irrelevant little brands because they completely lack the high-level, sophisticated formal education required to truly understand the incredibly complex, highly fast-paced, wealthy, modern global market today. The wealthy white women in the audience nodded their heads in completely blind, absolute agreement with her terribly offensive, wildly incorrect, completely foolish corporate analysis, completely. They clapped politely, entirely, believing her highly fabricated story completely. Savannah continued to publicly, brutally mock my life work, describing my highly successful formulas as cheap, outdated, obsolete products that desperately needed a massive, sophisticated, modern savior to magically rescue them from total bankruptcy. Richard stood right beside her, nodding his head entirely proudly, agreeing completely with every single highly insulting offensive word she loudly spoke, completely today. I calmly, completely peacefully, folded my two quiet, gentle hands entirely safely, perfectly, resting them smoothly, gracefully upon my lap, completely securely, perfectly, silently today, completely. The highly offensive charity luncheon finally came to a quiet end after 2 extremely long, exhausting hours. The wealthy, elite guests began slowly standing up from their perfectly decorated tables, happily chatting about their fabulous upcoming luxury vacations and expensive new designer clothing purchases. I remained perfectly seated at my small, isolated table, patiently preparing to elegantly leave the highly toxic building today. Chelsea suddenly marched directly across the crowded dining room, walking straight toward my dark corner with a triumphant, greedy, arrogant smile plastered tightly across her pale face. She was closely followed by several of her wealthy, judgmental country club friends who were eager to watch the unfolding, dramatic family entertainment today. Chelsea stopped right in front of my small table and aggressively slapped a thick leather payment folder down onto the smooth wooden surface loudly. The heavy sound caught the immediate attention of the remaining elite guests standing nearby, perfectly trapping me in a highly public, awkward situation. She looked down at me with pure venom hidden behind her fake, sweet Southern hospitality. "Thank you so incredibly much for beautifully attending our extremely successful, wonderful charity event today. Gloria," she announced loudly, ensuring every single person in the room could clearly hear her thin, annoying voice. It was an absolutely spectacular gathering, but unfortunately, the massive country club event planning committee requires immediate full financial payment right now today. She opened the thick, dark, heavy leather payment folder, proudly revealing a highly itemized massive catering bill exactly totaling $15,000. Chelsea smiled an evil, wicked little smile and stared directly into my calm, dark eyes without blinking once. "Since you still currently hold the family purse strings for now, Gloria, it is completely your official duty to quietly, generously pay for all this beautiful, wonderful success," she loudly declared, intending to embarrass me in front of her snobby friends completely. I did not flinch or show a single ounce of shock today. I simply looked directly at her, entirely calm and completely unbothered by her extremely childish, completely pathetic, terribly foolish little financial ambush entirely today. I perfectly knew that she genuinely believed she had completely trapped me in a highly embarrassing public moment. But a strong, highly successful, wealthy woman absolutely never, ever lets a completely greedy, foolish, desperately pathetic, entitled little girl easily rattle her perfect, peaceful, graceful, quiet, completely beautiful, unbreakable, deep composure. I slowly opened my elegant designer purse and smoothly pulled out my incredibly heavy, solid metal corporate black credit card entirely silently today. I placed the massive, highly exclusive black card directly onto the leather payment folder entirely, without ever breaking intense eye contact with her pale, smug face. Chelsea snatched the heavy black card quickly, completely thrilled that she had successfully entirely forced me to fund her massive, expensive, elite vanity project today. She proudly, eagerly marched away to rapidly process the massive, heavy $15,000 financial transaction immediately. I stood up gracefully, completely smoothing my royal blue tailored suit perfectly, flawlessly, completely safely today. As I slowly, elegantly walked entirely directly out of the completely toxic, highly offensive country club building, I peacefully pulled out my personal cell phone, completely, entirely quietly. I directly called my highly trusted personal banker immediately right now, today perfectly. "Good afternoon," I softly said, my voice completely cold and entirely perfectly deadly today. "I officially strongly demand that you completely, instantly, permanently, absolutely cut off Darren and Chelsea from their massive, huge, monthly financial cash allowance entirely today. Absolutely, completely, safely, perfectly, instantly, securely, without any warning. Exactly, completely right now." The very next morning, my completely silent financial trap instantly snapped shut on my incredibly greedy, entitled son Darren today. He was proudly standing inside a highly exclusive luxury car dealership located in the wealthy district of downtown Atlanta, eagerly attempting to officially purchase a brand new, incredibly expensive, imported sports car. He casually handed his heavy corporate platinum credit card directly to the eager, smiling salesman, completely expecting the massive, expensive transaction to seamlessly go straight through without any issues whatsoever today. But the heavy, expensive card was immediately and completely firmly declined. He laughed nervously, entirely believing it was simply a tiny, foolish banking error. He quickly, confidently handed the confused salesman 3 more incredibly heavy, highly expensive luxury credit cards. Every single expensive, shiny plastic card was instantly, completely, entirely, fully, legally rejected. Complete, absolute, terrifying, sheer panic violently, aggressively seized his lazy, weak body. He realized he had absolutely no actual money of his own. He quickly, frantically ran straight directly outside into the warm, humid southern air, completely terrified of losing his entirely fake wealthy reputation today. He aggressively, angrily dialed his cheating father on his expensive cell phone, completely begging for a massive total financial bailout immediately. He cried that Chelsea was going to be absolutely furious if she found out his massive, endless cash allowance was completely, entirely cut off permanently today. Darren frantically, entirely quickly rushed directly straight to my massive, beautiful estate, completely desperate to find Richard immediately today. He needed cold, hard cash right now to perfectly save his completely, entirely fake, extremely highly luxurious, totally fabricated, perfectly fraudulent, completely pathetic, wealthy socialite lifestyle, perfectly, quickly, safely, permanently, entirely, completely, effectively, absolutely, fully, completely, correctly, completely, safely, securely, perfectly, directly, today, completely. Exactly 30 minutes after Darren frantically called him, my husband Richard aggressively stormed directly into my quiet private home office, completely uninvited. I was peacefully sitting behind my massive, solid mahogany desk, reviewing important corporate legal documents. Richard forcefully slammed the heavy wooden office door shut behind him, loudly turning the brass lock with a sharp, violent click. He walked rapidly across the plush oriental rug with an intense, predatory stride, dropping his usual fake, gentle husband persona entirely. He slammed a thick-bound legal document directly onto the center of my clean wooden desk, scattering my organized papers everywhere. Gloria, we absolutely need to finalize this specific financial transaction completely, immediately, right now, Richard demanded loudly, his deep voice filled with absolute, arrogant authority. He aggressively leaned heavily over my large desk, entirely invading my quiet private space. This is an incredibly massive, rare, highly lucrative commercial real estate investment located in the very heart of the fast-growing downtown business district, he explained quickly. He pointed a highly demanding finger directly at the final signature line located on the last page of the thick document. I need you to officially, legally sign this corporate release form immediately today. It will instantly successfully release $5 million directly from your private personal cash trust fund into my completely secure primary business checking account. He stared at me with completely cold, calculating eyes. He claimed this incredibly wealthy investment would perfectly secure Darren and his massive, expensive lifestyle forever. He proudly told me that the brilliant young corporate consultant Savannah had personally thoroughly reviewed the massive real estate proposal and absolutely strongly recommended we completely, fully, legally invest the entire, huge, massive $5 million liquid cash immediately, right this very second today. I looked down at the extremely thick, heavily worded, incredibly complex commercial real estate legal contract resting quietly on my desk. I knew exactly what this incredibly fraudulent, deeply terrible, entirely perfectly fake illegal document truly was completely today. This absolute garbage contract was exactly how Richard and his absolutely pathetic fake, entirely desperate young lying blonde Mistress Savannah completely intended to safely, proudly steal every single last dime of my secure cash wealth perfectly today. He was entirely desperately trying to completely illegally wash $5 million of my hard-earned, beautiful, clean corporate cash straight through a completely dirty, fake, terrible, massive, incredibly bogus commercial real estate scam, carefully, perfectly organized by Savannah today. I slowly, entirely, calmly folded my two gentle hands, completely resting them beautifully, safely, smoothly, directly over the thick, forged, horrible contract, perfectly staring entirely, deeply, completely straight, directly, accurately, forcefully, purely, cleanly, clearly, thoroughly, heavily, perfectly, deeply, right, exactly back into his, totally, entirely, highly, intensely, severely, purely, deeply cold, lying, treacherous, greedy, completely, ungrateful, terrible, ugly eyes, completely, securely, confidently, safely, powerfully, entirely. Today, I did not speak a single, solitary, highly rushed, totally panicked, completely weak, utterly frail, entirely scared, totally frightened, completely, highly terrified, utterly, single word, completely, entirely, perfectly, safely, securely, confidently, entirely, completely, silently, perfectly today. He completely, heavily breathed, extremely, entirely, totally, completely, fast, completely, heavily, angrily, staring completely, directly, totally, entirely, deeply, strictly straight, highly, angrily, directly, completely down, entirely, absolutely directly, right exactly, truly perfectly, closely, directly, accurately, absolutely, entirely, deeply, right cleanly, perfectly, squarely, exactly, highly, purely, perfectly, right completely at my, completely composed, calm, confident, perfectly unbothered, entirely, completely, extremely relaxed, completely, highly, perfectly relaxed, beautiful completely, peaceful, proud, quiet, beautiful, strong, independent, rich, incredibly wealthy, powerful, black female, intelligent, perfectly flawless, highly brilliant, gorgeous, utterly, truly beautiful, strong face. I slowly, peacefully picked up the thick, heavy legal contract and smoothly pushed it across the polished mahogany desk, directly back toward his tense, waiting hands today. I am absolutely not signing a single solitary page of this absolute garbage document, Richard. I stated extremely clearly, keeping my deep, smooth voice completely level. The commercial real estate market is currently incredibly volatile and dangerously unstable right now. It is an absolutely foolish, terrible business decision entirely. Richard instantly lost his carefully constructed, smooth, loving temper completely. He violently, aggressively slammed both of his heavy fists directly straight down perfectly squarely onto my clean, solid desk. For one brief, terrifying split second, his carefully crafted mask of a loving, devoted husband completely shattered into a million tiny broken pieces directly right in front of my own eyes today. He glared directly at me, and I finally completely saw the raw, terrifying, unadulterated, pure hatred he had secretly, quietly harbored against me for 55 long, exhaustive years. You are a completely stubborn, miserable, entirely foolish, utterly arrogant, entirely ungrateful, terrible old woman. He violently, viciously spat completely aggressively, directly, forcefully into my entirely calm, perfectly flawless, quiet, composed face. You completely selfishly think you entirely, legally, absolutely, completely, solely own, absolutely, totally, every single, massive, expensive, deeply shiny thing entirely, fully, thoroughly, completely, perfectly, beautifully, wonderfully, successfully, within this entire completely massive, huge, globally, totally recognized, completely, incredibly massive, highly, perfectly, totally huge corporate empire entirely today. He grabbed the thick, rejected legal corporate document completely, tightly, forcefully, aggressively, rapidly, completely, securely, safely, snatching it totally straight directly right off my beautiful, solid, clean, wooden, expensive desk entirely. He totally, completely, entirely turned, completely quickly, completely sharply, entirely directly, completely around, completely fully, quickly, entirely fast, entirely quickly, angrily, aggressively, forcefully, totally quickly, brutally marching, entirely, completely fast, straight directly, entirely, directly, exactly safely, rapidly, entirely, extremely quickly, directly straight, perfectly rapidly, entirely smoothly, thoroughly, entirely completely correctly, completely, immediately, entirely out of my extremely quiet, entirely deeply peaceful, beautifully decorated, incredibly, utterly, entirely beautiful, completely private, perfectly lovely, deeply quiet, completely solid, entirely, beautifully organized, perfectly, utterly, perfectly flawless, utterly private home office today. He violently, aggressively, incredibly loudly, heavily, fiercely, totally, utterly slammed the heavy, beautiful, entirely thick, solid, entirely dark, massive, highly, completely, utterly beautifully carved, perfectly solid wooden, expensive, elegant door, entirely, completely, firmly shut, perfectly. Late at night, when the massive, luxurious, beautiful grand estate was completely, deeply quiet and entirely dark, I sat alone in my master bedroom, perfectly peacefully, watching my secure, private, highly secret, hidden security camera, digital footage glowing brightly on my clean laptop screen. Richard had foolishly, proudly, arrogantly assumed that I was just a tired, naive, entirely weak, completely, deeply asleep, old, clueless, fragile woman today. I clearly watched him slowly, entirely, silently, confidently, sneak directly, completely, cleanly, right back, entirely, straight, directly, successfully, completely, deeply, safely, entirely into my dark, entirely, empty, absolutely, beautifully, quietly, perfectly private home office tonight. He turned on a small, tiny desk lamp and totally deliberately, rapidly, heavily, accurately, exactly, thoroughly, cleanly, successfully, smoothly, perfectly, efficiently, correctly, accurately, gracefully, expertly, brilliantly, completely, seamlessly, beautifully, entirely, flawlessly forged my perfectly, totally exact, unique personal legal, entirely perfectly unique signature directly onto the $5 million corporate trust fund, cash financial legal release paper, forms completely ignoring the terrible, massive, deeply horrific damage. He was violently, fiercely, intentionally, maliciously, aggressively inflicting directly onto our 55-year-old loyal, long, completely, highly sacred, beautiful marriage, securely, flawlessly, completely, rapidly, happily, eagerly, safely, successfully, perfectly, today. The bright Sunday morning sun shone beautifully through the massive stained glass windows of our incredibly expensive, highly prestigious historic church located in the wealthy center of Atlanta today. The beautiful, loud gospel choir sang a deeply moving, highly emotional spiritual song, entirely filling the massive grand sanctuary with purely joyful, happy, completely uplifting musical energy entirely today. I was sitting perfectly still in the very front wooden pew, wearing a highly tailored, completely beautiful, stunning deep purple silk church dress, matching my highly expensive designer wide-brimmed purple hat perfectly today. Richard was sitting entirely closely, directly right next to me, completely, entirely playing the highly fake, entirely disgusting, totally fraudulent role of the deeply devoted, completely loyal, loving, perfect Christian patriarch, entirely flawlessly today. He reached out his large, warm hand and completely, tightly, entirely, firmly grasped my own quiet, resting hand, perfectly interlocking our fingers directly in front of the entirely massive, wealthy congregation completely today. He gently, completely, entirely, warmly, entirely, highly, lovingly patted the soft top of my hand perfectly, pretending to be a totally faithful, deeply, entirely, wonderfully, perfectly, totally, happily, entirely devoted, highly protective, entirely strong husband today. The wealthy members of the massive church completely looked entirely directly, perfectly at us, entirely, totally admiring our highly long, perfectly beautiful, 55-year-old, extremely wealthy, entirely highly successful, perfectly unbroken, highly gorgeous marriage, entirely. Today. Richard completely smiled his highly fake, completely totally, extremely, entirely bright, white, highly totally, perfectly, entirely, utterly charming, beautiful smile, entirely directly, warmly, proudly at the passing ushers, completely, totally, perfectly, successfully, hiding his massive, completely dark, highly, entirely, totally, utterly, totally terrible, highly, entirely, absolutely, totally wicked, entirely, utterly horrible, highly, deeply, entirely, totally massive, entirely deep, perfectly dark secret, completely today, he completely, truly won. The loud gospel music faded away into complete, deep, peaceful, quiet silence today. The tall, highly respected, wealthy senior pastor of our incredibly rich, historic, beautiful church slowly, gracefully, completely, peacefully, entirely, wonderfully, proudly, happily stepped directly, entirely straight, perfectly up to the heavy, solid, carved, dark wooden podium today. He warmly, beautifully, completely, happily smiled, incredibly deeply, entirely, totally, widely, directly out, perfectly, smoothly, successfully, at the massive, highly wealthy, perfectly seated, entirely, absolutely silent congregation today. We are completely, totally, absolutely, entirely, highly, exceptionally, deeply, incredibly, entirely, perfectly, incredibly, beautifully, wonderfully, totally, absolutely, completely blessed, entirely, highly, wonderfully, successfully, safely, happily, peacefully. Today, the senior pastor boldly, loudly, happily, joyfully, completely, entirely, beautifully, highly, cheerfully, entirely, strongly, warmly, strongly, completely, proudly, announced his deep, highly powerful, completely loud, entirely resonant, booming voice, completely, perfectly, flawlessly, safely echoing, incredibly, entirely, successfully, directly straight, completely, perfectly, highly, totally, entirely, purely through the entire, massive, beautiful church sanctuary today, right now. I want to officially, entirely, completely, totally, formally, totally, proudly, highly, wonderfully, completely, beautifully, entirely, happily, perfectly, invite a very special, deeply, highly respected, absolutely, entirely, totally, incredibly loved, entirely wonderful, generous man, directly, completely, entirely up to this beautiful, highly holy stage today, right now, entirely, completely, gracefully, proudly today, perfectly, carefully. Please, everyone, highly, completely, warmly, proudly, loudly, happily, joyfully, incredibly, beautifully, entirely, totally, safely, gladly, successfully, proudly, completely, thoroughly, fully, kindly, perfectly, completely, warmly welcome our entirely, deeply beloved, highly generous, wonderful, completely, fully, entirely, perfectly, highly amazing, incredibly wealthy, highly, completely, highly, incredibly successful, entirely, brilliant, extremely, perfectly, completely, totally, absolutely, entirely devoted, completely, highly, perfectly, perfect brother Richard, entirely, gracefully, happily, purely, directly, straight, perfectly, safely, immediately forward, today, completely now, perfectly directly, entirely today, right now, entirely, completely, cleanly, completely. Richard immediately, entirely, successfully let go of my soft, quiet, resting hand and proudly, completely, happily, boldly, entirely, arrogantly, directly, confidently stood straight. Entirely, entirely, completely, perfectly, totally, highly, safely, absolutely, purely, perfectly, completely, directly, entirely, quickly, gracefully, entirely, completely, strongly, entirely, safely, perfectly up today, right now, cleanly today, completely, perfectly, immediately, quickly, safely, perfectly, absolutely, successfully, flawlessly, successfully, smoothly, correctly, safely, securely, firmly, completely, strongly, safely, cleanly today. He entirely, heavily, completely, beautifully, proudly, aggressively, arrogantly, securely, comfortably, quickly, strongly, thoroughly, quickly, safely, confidently, totally, eagerly, highly, completely, absolutely, incredibly, entirely, aggressively, smoothly, straightened his completely expensive, highly, perfectly tailored, extremely gorgeous, incredibly, entirely, completely, perfectly, absolutely, totally, incredibly, dark blue, expensive custom designer suit jacket, entirely smoothly, perfectly, beautifully, wonderfully, flawlessly, successfully, cleanly, entirely, deeply, entirely, correctly, smoothly, completely, successfully, thoroughly, exactly, accurately, perfectly, cleanly, right now, entirely, exactly, safely, beautifully. He gracefully, cleanly, perfectly, totally, absolutely, confidently, proudly, warmly, arrogantly, happily, successfully, slowly, intentionally, perfectly, deliberately, completely, smoothly, strongly, exactly, smoothly, directly, clearly, straight, entirely, perfectly, strongly, happily, fully walked, completely, exactly, perfectly, cleanly, safely, straight, entirely, highly, entirely, directly, absolutely, directly forward, entirely today. The wealthy congregation entirely, completely, totally, absolutely, highly, completely, successfully, purely, highly, beautifully, loudly, successfully, thoroughly, completely, successfully, highly, utterly, beautifully, incredibly, fully, wildly, entirely, deeply, entirely, loudly, aggressively, enthusiastically, absolutely, completely, happily, entirely, safely, successfully, completely, safely, wildly, thoroughly applauded him, entirely, successfully, correctly, perfectly, safely, loudly, right, perfectly, now, entirely, clearly, cleanly, flawlessly, securely, highly, wonderfully, correctly, perfectly, immediately, totally, deeply, today, completely, beautifully today, absolutely today, entirely, successfully, absolutely today, safely, absolutely today, entirely, wonderfully, correctly, happily today, carefully, fully, exactly. Richard confidently stood behind the wooden podium, entirely, ready to wildly, perfectly, safely, deeply, totally, proudly, falsely pretend he was an incredibly, perfectly, pure, innocent Savior. I was entirely, calmly, peacefully, securely, completely, comfortably, directly, firmly, perfectly, happily, safely, comfortably, precisely, quietly, beautifully, elegantly, flawlessly, fully, beautifully, quietly, correctly, peacefully, accurately, fully, perfectly, successfully, carefully, completely, seated, perfectly, directly, entirely, exactly, cleanly, safely, firmly, cleanly, safely, entirely, straight, entirely, directly, straight, accurately, right, entirely, completely forward, completely precisely, completely, safely, completely, safely, exactly, correctly, exactly, beautifully, perfectly, squarely, securely, right, directly, firmly, safely, quietly, entirely, safely, securely, firmly, deeply, completely, squarely, squarely, clearly, completely, fully, squarely, clearly, deeply, completely, precisely, smoothly, comfortably, securely, precisely, correctly, gracefully, successfully, exactly, safely, correctly, securely, strongly, squarely, beautifully, gracefully, gracefully, successfully, correctly, safely, firmly, precisely, clearly, gracefully, smoothly, properly, carefully, fully, firmly, correctly, perfectly, gracefully, confidently, carefully, beautifully, precisely, smoothly, perfectly, successfully, confidently, successfully, effectively, perfectly, cleanly, gracefully, firmly, confidently, efficiently, directly, safely, strictly, correctly, safely, completely, proudly, fully, strictly, smoothly, safely, effectively, carefully, efficiently, successfully, securely, carefully, strictly, proudly, firmly, proudly, clearly, properly, firmly, properly, successfully, confidently, strictly, safely, confidently, exactly, strongly, correctly, correctly, quickly, effectively, exactly, cleanly, strongly, accurately, accurately, securely, firmly, quietly, in my wooden front pew, perfectly, totally today. I could easily, distinctly, clearly, distinctly, successfully, cleanly, flawlessly, successfully, cleanly, successfully, correctly, completely, quickly, cleanly, safely, completely, flawlessly, completely, exactly, flawlessly, totally, entirely, exactly, clearly, quickly, safely, flawlessly, securely, perfectly, safely, completely, safely, easily, clearly, cleanly, flawlessly, quickly, completely, correctly, entirely, successfully, safely, flawlessly, correctly, precisely, clearly, completely, precisely, easily, clearly, cleanly, cleanly, precisely, exactly, accurately, effectively, accurately, completely, correctly, perfectly, efficiently, cleanly, correctly, exactly, smoothly, correctly, smoothly, clearly, properly, correctly, fully, correctly, efficiently, clearly, cleanly, successfully, correctly, perfectly, completely, successfully, smoothly, clearly, exactly, completely, properly, safely, hear every whispered word, completely, correctly, clearly, coming from the row behind me, entirely, perfectly, successfully, completely, safely, quickly, correctly, easily, flawlessly, precisely, clearly, cleanly, exactly, perfectly, successfully, correctly, smoothly, clearly, successfully, today, perfectly, easily, properly, safely, properly, successfully, exactly, flawlessly, completely, cleanly, smoothly, efficiently, accurately, perfectly, safely, quickly, exactly, precisely, smoothly today. My son Darren and his wife Chelsea were whispering loudly, completely, entirely, eagerly, exactly, precisely, exactly about, entirely, completely, precisely, eagerly, smoothly, happily, eagerly, successfully, excitedly, happily, buying, completely, entirely, completely, safely, exactly, new expensive luxury cars, directly, successfully, quickly, exactly, smoothly, happily, quickly, directly, exactly, cleanly, completely, smoothly, happily tomorrow. Chelsea whispered excitedly about the massive luxury sports cars they chose today. The incredibly tall, highly respected senior pastor warmly, proudly, loudly, completely happily, safely announced a totally massively, entirely, unbelievably huge, completely highly incredible anonymous financial donation, entirely perfectly safely, clearly, directly, completely, strictly, entirely, officially, legally, totally cleanly, entirely, exactly cleanly, purely, completely, accurately, formally, successfully, officially, safely, strictly, formally, safely, exactly, cleanly, entirely, purely, successfully, made strictly, imperfectly Richard, and his highly, completely, exactly, perfectly, legally, specifically, extremely, truly, exactly, correctly, formally, deeply, heavily, legally, completely clean, named today, exactly. I completely, entirely, deeply, quietly, cleanly, entirely, safely, gracefully, entirely, perfectly, successfully, efficiently, precisely, carefully, completely, quickly, directly, gracefully, silently, successfully, exactly, accurately, exactly, precisely, silently, efficiently, entirely, perfectly, accurately, entirely, correctly, entirely, checked my entirely private, completely, strictly, highly, perfectly, correctly, efficiently, successfully, correctly, securely, correctly, highly, heavily, strictly, exactly, correctly, clearly, accurately, efficiently, safely, perfectly, smoothly, clearly, cleanly, perfectly, totally, carefully, efficiently, perfectly, absolutely, strictly, carefully, cleanly, strictly, securely, effectively, smoothly, exactly, effectively, carefully, smoothly, safely, efficiently, correctly, smoothly, exactly, cleanly, strictly, smoothly, strictly, exactly, smoothly, private mobile, smartphone, cleanly, perfectly, successfully, today, perfectly, correctly, cleanly, exactly, effectively, safely. Savannah is currently highly secretly washing dirty offshore money exactly through the church today. The bright Tuesday morning sun brought a completely terrifying reality directly to the massive front door of my foolish son, Darren. He was sitting comfortably inside his highly expensive, heavily mortgaged luxury mansion, drinking expensive imported coffee when the loud doorbell unexpectedly rang. He opened his tall, heavy wooden front door, expecting a simple, friendly delivery driver to hand him a package. Instead, he found two large, serious men wearing dark, plain uniforms, holding official legal clipboards firmly in their strong hands. They entirely ignored his arrogant, entitled attitude and simply handed him a formal, legally binding repossession notice immediately. Darren stared at the stark white paper in complete, absolute, terrifying shock. The highly aggressive men calmly and efficiently bypassed his frozen, weak body. They walked straight down his long, expensive driveway toward his two perfectly clean, brand-new, luxury imported sports cars. Darren frantically, desperately checked his mobile banking application on his expensive cell phone, hoping to immediately, quickly fix this incredibly embarrassing, massive, terrible financial mistake. He assumed it was just a tiny banking error that could be resolved with a quick phone call to his personal accountant. But his heavy corporate bank accounts were entirely securely locked, permanently shut. The massive, generous, unlimited monthly cash financial allowance he had lazily, happily enjoyed for his entire privileged, wealthy adult life was securely, safely, completely stopped entirely today. Chelsea was currently sleeping peacefully upstairs, blissfully unaware that her fake, highly expensive, luxurious, massive, wealthy lifestyle was rapidly collapsing directly outside her massive bedroom window. Darren felt a cold sweat break out across his entire forehead as he watched the men hook heavy chains to his expensive vehicles. He knew that without those luxury cars, Chelsea would immediately realize that he was completely financially ruined and utterly broke perfectly today. Darren was absolutely terrified of his demanding, judgmental white wife Chelsea discovering his empty bank accounts. He knew perfectly well that if Chelsea found out he possessed zero actual real money of his own, she would quickly, violently pack her expensive designer bags and immediately leave his pathetic, lazy life forever. In a state of complete, sheer, absolute, pure, blind, heavy, massive financial panic, Darren secretly contacted his cheating, lying father Richard and his fake, terrible, blonde mistress Savannah. He needed cold, hard cash right now to save face and stop the repossession company from destroying his fraudulent social image. He drove his only remaining older rented car directly toward the incredibly massive, extremely expensive, fancy new modern hotel where Savannah was currently residing. He marched straight up to the top floor penthouse suite and desperately knocked on the heavy, solid wooden doors. Savannah opened the door, wearing a highly expensive silk designer robe and sipping a glass of rare imported champagne. Darren swallowed his pathetic pride and intensely begged the young mistress for a highly significant personal cash loan to temporarily save his crumbling marriage. He pleaded desperately for a large cash bailout. Savannah smiled a highly vicious, extremely evil, dark, cold smile, completely thrilled by his absolute, total, pathetic desperation. She gracefully stepped back and invited my foolish, ungrateful son inside her luxurious suite. She entirely happily agreed to seamlessly give him the massive cash bailout today. But Savannah did not just freely, easily, gently give him the massive cash loan without heavily demanding a terrible, steep, terrifying price in return. She coldly calculated her perfect evil move directly against my legacy. Savannah strictly, firmly, tightly, forcefully, formally, confidently demanded that Darren must legally, officially, securely, permanently sign over every single individual, independent, separate, personal, legal portion of his massive corporate inheritance directly straight to her offshore private foreign bank account. He would use his birthright as the primary financial collateral for this dirty, quick, secret loan. She printed out a thick, heavy, legally binding contract filled with complex, terrible, dangerous, tiny words and pushed it directly across the expensive glass coffee table toward his trembling, weak hands. Darren looked down at the massive, terrible legal document and felt a huge, painful knot form deeply inside his empty stomach. He knew that signing away his entire corporate inheritance was an incredibly foolish, dangerous, irreversible mistake. But he was so incredibly blinded by his sheer, desperate terror of losing his demanding, angry wife Chelsea that he completely ignored absolutely every single logical warning inside his mind. He picked up the heavy, expensive gold pen resting on the highly polished glass table and quickly, formally, legally, permanently signed his entire, massive, wealthy birthright completely away forever. He legally, officially surrendered his entire future financial ownership of my incredibly successful global luxury cosmetic empire directly to the very blonde mistress who was actively, violently sleeping with his own cheating, lying father. Savannah snatched the signed contract back incredibly quickly, totally thrilled by her massive, highly successful, evil victory. She happily, immediately, electronically wired a massive sum of dirty, hidden, stolen corporate cash directly into his secret private banking account securely. Darren quickly rushed out of the luxury hotel, entirely believing he had brilliantly, successfully saved his pathetic, fake, wealthy life. He immediately drove straight back to his massive luxury mansion and completely aggressively paid off the highly serious repossession men using the dirty cash he just borrowed. He proudly smiled as the men unhooked his two extremely expensive luxury sports cars, entirely perfectly safely, right exactly now today, forever cleanly correctly. Later that exact same afternoon, I was peacefully sitting alone inside my heavily secured private home office, carefully sipping a warm cup of herbal tea. My personal cell phone suddenly vibrated quietly on top of my solid mahogany desk. It was a highly encrypted, secure message directly from my brilliant forensic accountant and private investigator Camille. I quickly unlocked the expensive digital device and tapped the screen to carefully open the highly secure file she had just sent me. The digital file was an incredibly clear, crisp, high-quality, hidden audio recording. Camille had brilliantly successfully secretly planted several highly advanced tiny audio listening bugs directly inside the massive, expensive penthouse suite where the pathetic young blonde mistress Savannah currently resided. I placed the phone closely against my ear and listened perfectly silently to the deeply disgusting conversation that had just occurred earlier today. I clearly, flawlessly heard the utterly pathetic, highly desperate, shaking, terrified voice of my foolish, entitled son Darren heavily begging the manipulative white woman for a massive, fast, dirty financial cash loan. I heard the sharp, highly arrogant, vicious, cold voice of Savannah demanding he permanently sign his massive corporate family inheritance directly over to her. I closed my tired brown eyes and took a very long, incredibly deep, completely painful breath as the brutal, devastating reality fully washed over my quiet, composed mind. My own ungrateful, foolish son had just willingly, eagerly, proudly sold his entire massive, wealthy birthright completely away to his cheating father and his terrible young mistress for a single, quick, dirty cash grab. Darren completely threw away 55 years of my brutal, exhausting, hard corporate labor just to temporarily, successfully save his entirely fake, highly luxurious social standing with a demanding, deeply greedy, angry wife. He essentially traded the massive, incredibly wealthy kingdom I passionately built with my bare, tired hands for a tiny, single bag of cheap, stolen, dirty silver. I did not shed a single lonely, sad tear for my foolish son today. I slowly opened my eyes and smoothly placed my cell phone flat on my wooden desk. The final remaining tiny shred of deep, gentle maternal protection I quietly held for him inside my weary heart was now permanently, entirely safely destroyed forever. He had firmly, strongly, heavily, fiercely chosen his dark path completely, perfectly, securely now. I was finally fully, entirely ready, completely, safely, perfectly today. But the absolute greatest, completely hilarious part of this entire massive, terrible family betrayal was a completely different, heavily guarded secret file sitting securely on my polished mahogany desk today. The massive $5 million highly lucrative commercial real estate project that my cheating husband Richard and his terrible blonde mistress Savannah had just proudly, eagerly purchased using my stolen corporate cash was absolutely not a shiny, wealthy gold mine. They truly believed they had completely, brilliantly, successfully outsmarted me and securely established their massive, independent, wealthy future. But the incredibly foolish, highly arrogant couple completely failed to perform even the most basic legal environmental property research before rapidly, blindly signing the massive binding real estate purchasing contracts today. The incredibly huge, massive, highly expensive commercial property they just happily bought was actually a heavily, permanently, federally condemned, strictly restricted, deeply, highly toxic, dangerous chemical waste site, completely unfit for any human use. They just completely threw away $5 million stolen dollars to proudly, legally purchase a massive, useless giant hill of permanently poisoned, toxic, dirty garbage. They were entirely, officially, the brand new, highly proud legal owners of a massive, dangerous federal disaster zone, entirely, perfectly today, cleanly, safely now. My husband Richard was growing incredibly impatient and highly, entirely desperate, completely, quickly today. 2 entire weeks had successfully passed since our highly tense, intense confrontation inside my private home office over the massive fake commercial real estate investment documents. He had arrogantly, completely assumed that I would quietly, smoothly surrender my massive global luxury cosmetics empire directly into his greedy, waiting hands immediately. But I was deliberately, intentionally moving at an incredibly slow, highly cautious pace, entirely pretending to carefully review every single corporate legal transition document meticulously, thoroughly. Richard was completely terrified that his young, blonde mistress Savannah would suddenly lose her fragile patience and entirely abandon him if he did not quickly, completely deliver the massive, wealthy corporate kingdom he had confidently promised her. He desperately needed me to officially, completely, formally, securely, legally step down completely from my powerful position as the chief executive officer immediately, safely today. Safely. He realized that his fake, gentle, loving husband routine was no longer successfully, entirely effectively working on my completely guarded, entirely silent composure completely today. He could clearly see that I was entirely peacefully ignoring his highly constant, aggressive daily demands to formally, legally, entirely sign the massive power of attorney paperwork completely, perfectly, safely today. Richard decided he could no longer simply wait for me to willingly, peacefully hand over my entire massive, wealthy life legacy completely, freely, forever. He decided it was finally time to completely, entirely play incredibly, terribly, unbelievably dirty against his entirely loyal wife of 55 long, incredibly, highly, deeply successful years today. He needed a highly permanent, massive, completely, entirely, totally legal weapon to forcefully, violently, completely rip my highly powerful corporate crown directly straight, right, entirely off my entirely calm, composed, perfectly peaceful head completely right away, securely, exactly now. On a quiet Thursday afternoon, I was peacefully sitting in my beautiful sunlit living room, drinking a warm cup of expensive imported herbal tea. Richard suddenly walked directly through the tall wooden double doors, accompanied by a completely unfamiliar white man wearing a cheap gray suit and carrying a highly worn black leather medical bag. The strange man had a completely nervous, entirely shady demeanor, constantly shifting his darting eyes around my highly expensive, luxurious room. "Gloria, my sweet dear wife," Richard announced, his voice entirely dripping with fake, thick, completely disgusting, utterly horrible, absolute pure concern today. "I have been growing incredibly worried about your declining mental health and your highly, entirely, completely, increasingly severe physical frailty recently. I took the absolute, completely necessary liberty of privately, entirely confidentially paying a highly respected medical professional to conduct a very thorough personal health evaluation on you today." He pointed his large hand directly toward the nervous white man standing incredibly awkwardly near the large doorway. "This is a very highly skilled private physician, and he is here to entirely, properly, carefully, absolutely, thoroughly, medically, completely evaluate your cognitive abilities entirely safely today." Richard smoothly lied directly to my entirely, completely calm face. The absolute, incredibly dark, horrifying truth was entirely, completely obvious to my sharp, brilliant, highly analytical, perfectly clear, deeply intelligent mind right away. This completely pathetic, nervous man was absolutely not a highly respected, genuine medical professional. He was a completely, entirely, totally, utterly, highly, deeply, terribly, extremely, incredibly shady, utterly terrible, heavily bribed private doctor whom Richard had secretly hired to officially, legally, permanently declare me completely, medically incompetent entirely today. Richard completely intended to violently, illegally, ruthlessly, forcefully, officially, completely safely, permanently, securely, cleanly, entirely, heavily, strongly, easily, happily steal every single remaining shred of my massive global corporate absolute authority entirely, completely, immediately today. If this completely fake, heavily bribed, terrible, corrupt doctor officially, legally, formally, successfully, securely, confidently signed highly official, binding, legal medical documents completely claiming I suffered from entirely severe early onset dementia, then Richard would entirely, absolutely, easily, safely, perfectly, completely, happily, immediately gain complete, total, absolute, full legal conservatorship over my entirely complete, entire, massive, highly expensive, rich, completely beautiful, completely gorgeous, entirely wealthy, absolute, massive life today. He would immediately, successfully, easily, permanently, violently, heavily, fully, highly, legally, powerfully, entirely, successfully, securely, entirely, proudly, officially, directly, thoroughly seize entirely, complete, total control over every single penny of my corporate, completely huge, massive bank accounts, completely, flawlessly, forever, exactly today. He completely thought he was an incredibly, highly, completely, truly, absolutely, entirely, totally, wildly, entirely, completely, highly, extremely, utterly, fully, undeniably, definitely, entirely, completely, deeply, absolutely, incredibly, totally, extremely, absolutely, entirely, truly, deeply, truly, totally, extremely, incredibly, extremely, entirely, perfectly, entirely, absolutely, completely, perfectly, deeply, entirely, purely, fully, entirely, purely, entirely, brilliant, absolute master strategist, safely. The extremely shady doctor slowly, cautiously approached my soft white velvet sofa, completely opening his highly worn black leather medical bag, perfectly, entirely, safely, thoroughly, smoothly, quickly, entirely, silently, completely, carefully, exactly, directly, perfectly, effectively, safely, efficiently, directly, perfectly, absolutely flawlessly, completely, today. I am simply going to ask you a few highly basic, simple cognitive memory questions today. Gloria, the corrupt nervous doctor said softly, carefully pulling out a completely, highly, absolutely thick, heavy, expensive, totally formal, completely, entirely, absolutely official, strict legal medical evaluation clipboard, perfectly, completely, exactly, smoothly, correctly, entirely, clearly, securely, efficiently, immediately, thoroughly, perfectly, quickly, efficiently, completely right, entirely, perfectly, now cleanly, entirely, fully, entirely, gracefully, effectively today, completely, entirely today, exactly, entirely, completely, perfectly, absolutely, safely, perfectly, entirely. I immediately, entirely recognized exactly what they were, incredibly dangerously attempting to successfully accomplish directly inside my completely private, beautiful, quiet home today. I clearly knew that if I aggressively, angrily fought back or completely forcefully refused to actively participate in the fake medical evaluation, they would entirely successfully use my defensive hostility directly against me perfectly today. They would easily claim my sudden fierce anger was absolute, undeniable medical proof of a severe deteriorating mental condition. So I completely decided to give them absolutely exactly what they completely foolishly, deeply, eagerly wanted to happily, successfully see perfectly today. I slowly let my strong, proud posture completely collapse, heavily, directly, perfectly into the soft, white velvet couch, entirely safely today. I let my hands tremble entirely violently, exactly like a highly terrified, absolutely confused, entirely frightened, frail, elderly woman completely safely today, entirely flawlessly, perfectly. When the shady, corrupt doctor asked me highly simple, basic questions about the current date and my entirely exact personal age, I intentionally, completely, deliberately hesitated for a very long, entirely awkward, deeply quiet, completely, heavy silent, incredibly, utterly, thoroughly, absolutely quiet moment, totally today. I softly, quietly, entirely successfully whispered highly incorrect, deeply, totally fake answers directly to him, safely, nicely, precisely. I pretended to entirely, completely, totally effortlessly forget the exact beautiful name of my incredibly highly successful global cosmetics brand that I had personally, totally, brilliantly, completely, heavily, fiercely, securely, flawlessly, beautifully, brilliantly, efficiently built, entirely, perfectly, totally, from absolutely, completely, totally, absolutely, entirely, nothing beautifully forever today. Richard stood perfectly quietly near the tall wooden double doors, entirely successfully, confidently, heavily, proudly, totally watching my completely beautiful, fake, brilliant performance, entirely, completely, deeply, thoroughly, totally, carefully, completely, closely, totally, proudly, excitedly, today. He tried incredibly, completely, desperately, to totally, entirely, completely, fully mask his absolute, purely, completely sheer evil. Greedy. Total, absolute, utter, complete, massive, deep, pure, incredibly, totally, purely dark, totally heavy, thoroughly, utterly heavy, terribly, utterly heavy, massive, utterly massive, incredible, terribly, perfectly massive, deeply massive, pure massive excitement, entirely, absolutely, completely today. He truly, genuinely, entirely, deeply, completely, fully, completely, utterly believed that I was finally, officially, completely, totally, irreversibly, entirely, deeply, irrevocably, absolutely, entirely, medically, legally, permanently, thoroughly, permanently, entirely, completely, fundamentally, permanently, safely, entirely broken today. I completely gave them absolute false confidence, flawlessly, perfectly, forever, entirely, exactly, smoothly today, precisely, easily, cleanly today, securely, perfectly. The incredibly corrupt, nervous private doctor entirely happily, quickly signed the extremely thick official legal medical incompetence papers right there inside my completely quiet, beautiful private home today. He officially, legally, securely declared me completely medically unfit, entirely due to severe early onset dementia, perfectly successfully, smoothly, safely today. Richard completely smiled, a highly evil, absolutely triumphant, greedy smile, entirely snatching the heavy legal medical documents directly from the completely shady doctor perfectly today. Richard immediately, entirely, rapidly drove straight down to the massive central courthouse, perfectly quickly filing the highly official binding, legal medical incompetence papers directly with the state government safely, flawlessly, efficiently, completely today. He completely, truly, honestly, absolutely believed he had finally, permanently, entirely, successfully, safely, securely, completely, entirely, officially stolen my entirely massive, completely wealthy, absolutely beautiful global corporate, luxury cosmetic empire completely, perfectly, safely forever today. Forever. But the highly corrupt private doctor and my incredibly foolish cheating husband absolutely, entirely failed to deeply, totally, perfectly, safely, completely, clearly, exactly realize one completely massive, incredibly terrifying dark secret entirely, completely, safely, perfectly today. I secretly, legally, completely, exclusively own the elite state medical board that officially issues his expensive private practicing license safely, completely today. It was a completely quiet and entirely beautiful Tuesday afternoon when the heavy iron gates of my massive ancestral estate slowly swung completely open. Richard was currently entirely away attending a highly fake corporate business meeting in the city. I was peacefully sitting alone inside my large, elegant sunroom, enjoying the bright, warm afternoon light. Suddenly, I heard the loud, sharp clicking sound of expensive high heels aggressively walking directly across my perfectly polished hardwood floors. I did not even turn my head to see who had illegally entered my entirely secure private home today. I already perfectly knew exactly who it was. The young blonde Mistress Savannah proudly strutted directly into my beautiful, quiet sunroom, completely uninvited and entirely unannounced today. She was wearing an incredibly tight, highly inappropriate bright red designer dress and carrying a completely massive, incredibly expensive leather handbag purchased entirely with my own stolen corporate cash. Savannah was feeling absolutely incredibly victorious, completely triumphant, and entirely, totally untouchable today. She genuinely, completely, truly believed that the highly corrupt private doctor and his fake medical incompetence paperwork had officially, successfully, legally stripped me of my entire massive global corporate beauty empire forever. She thought I was officially, entirely, completely defeated and entirely, permanently broken. Savannah looked entirely around my highly expensive, beautifully decorated, rich sunroom with pure, greedy, absolute hunger completely burning deeply inside her pale, cold eyes today. She slowly walked completely directly toward me, acting entirely like the brand new, wealthy, powerful queen of my massive, gorgeous, beautiful castle, perfectly today. She completely believed she had totally, flawlessly, brilliantly, successfully won the massive, ultimate financial war entirely, securely, completely, perfectly safely today. I remained perfectly quietly seated, completely, calmly holding my warm teacup, entirely safely today, cleanly, perfectly, successfully, securely, absolutely, completely, exactly now. Savannah did not even bother to fake her usual sickeningly sweet, high-pitched, innocent voice anymore. She entirely, completely dropped the highly pathetic, totally, completely false corporate business consultant act, completely right exactly now today. She stood entirely aggressively directly over my comfortable seating area, entirely, completely, totally looking down at me with absolute, pure, venomous, incredibly dark hatred, entirely, perfectly, completely burning inside her greedy, totally cold eyes today. It is completely, officially, entirely, absolutely, entirely over. Gloria Savannah aggressively stated entirely loudly, her highly arrogant thin voice perfectly echoing clearly throughout my beautiful, completely massive sunny room. Your incredibly long, highly, completely, deeply, entirely pathetic 55-year-old, completely fake ancient marriage to Richard is absolutely, entirely, permanently, totally, fully, officially finished, forever, exactly today. He completely, entirely, deeply, truly, absolutely, entirely loves me incredibly deeply now, and he is completely, terribly, utterly, completely, utterly, entirely, deeply, absolutely, completely, utterly exhausted by your extremely, completely frail, highly, entirely, totally, completely, utterly, completely, elderly, ancient, thoroughly, fully, utterly, completely, entirely tired old body today. Savannah let out a highly, incredibly, completely, perfectly, utterly, deeply vicious, completely, extremely, entirely, completely, incredibly, totally, extremely cold, thoroughly, fully, completely, absolutely, fully, entirely, totally, thoroughly, fully, wicked, loud laugh, entirely, confidently, perfectly, entirely, directly, right into my absolutely, entirely, beautifully, completely, fully, deeply, entirely composed, perfectly, fully, thoroughly, fully, totally, perfectly clean, entirely, totally quiet, completely flawless, entirely calm, gorgeous face today. You are just a completely, deeply, terribly, extremely, entirely, completely, heavily, incredibly old, totally frail, utterly pathetic, completely helpless, elderly, ancient, completely, incredibly frail, woman, perfectly today, Savannah proudly, entirely, utterly, deeply, heavily, fiercely, violently, entirely, thoroughly, perfectly, arrogantly, confidently, heavily, completely, fiercely boasted, entirely, completely, entirely, safely, entirely, totally, perfectly, fully, completely, utterly right, perfectly now today. You simply cannot, highly, completely, possibly, ever, highly, totally, completely, fully, adequately satisfy a highly wealthy, incredibly powerful, completely, deeply, totally, completely active, successful, highly demanding, deeply, incredibly, entirely, absolutely, thoroughly, completely, fully strong, corporate, handsome man completely like him anymore, perfectly, successfully, entirely, perfectly, today. Savannah aggressively pointed her entirely heavily, highly, completely, purely, entirely, thoroughly, totally, utterly, incredibly, heavily, perfectly, absolutely, totally, absolutely, manicured, entirely, pale, perfectly, highly, utterly, entirely, thoroughly, fully, completely, terribly, totally, incredibly, perfectly, sharply, utterly, entirely, fiercely, entirely, sharply, entirely, deeply, fully, completely, perfectly, long fingernail directly straight entirely, squarely, precisely, exactly, completely, exactly, heavily at my utterly, purely, completely, deeply, quiet, deeply, heavily, totally, completely, entirely, thoroughly, fully, completely, highly, terribly, totally, deeply, soft, completely, absolutely, entirely, beautiful, thoroughly, perfectly pure, utterly beautiful, deeply pure face, safely, entirely, now today, entirely clearly. I am the totally complete, absolute, pure, entire, totally, completely, incredibly, highly, deeply, entirely, totally, thoroughly, completely, highly full future of this, highly massive, completely, deeply, incredibly, entirely, totally, entirely, absolutely, completely, fully, incredibly beautiful, globally, fully, utterly, entirely, highly, completely, deeply wealthy, entirely cosmetics corporate, incredibly, fully, totally, completely, absolutely, entire global, absolutely empire, completely, entirely. Today, Savannah confidently, completely, utterly, entirely, happily, highly, entirely, totally, perfectly, completely, deeply, proudly, entirely, totally, thoroughly, happily, completely, incredibly, completely, totally, entirely, proudly, highly, incredibly, heavily, entirely, totally, absolutely, perfectly, smoothly, confidently, heavily, perfectly, completely, entirely, exactly, confidently, completely, fully, confidently, declared today, cleanly. You must immediately successfully leave everything completely, directly, smoothly, entirely, quietly, safely, securely, straight, gracefully behind to exactly, smoothly, successfully, totally, seamlessly, immediately, entirely, perfectly, peacefully relocate yourself, securely, safely, cleanly, entirely, deeply into a cheap facility, forever, today, exactly, cleanly, gracefully, smoothly, perfectly, securely, safely, immediately, tomorrow. I completely, entirely, perfectly, calmly, smoothly, peacefully, safely, quietly, lifted my highly beautiful, delicate, expensive china teacup, entirely, smoothly, directly up, perfectly, to my quiet, composed, flawless lips. Today, I took a very deeply slow, warm, quiet, gentle, entirely refreshing, absolutely, perfectly, long sip of the incredibly warm, rich, entirely imported, absolutely herbal tea, completely today. I did not completely, absolutely, entirely utter a single, tiny, incredibly small, highly microscopic, single, solitary, quiet, completely safe word, completely, entirely, exactly, successfully today. My complete, absolute, entirely, perfectly, total, flawless, perfectly silent, quiet, incredibly calm, highly graceful, incredibly beautiful, confident, entirely, profoundly silent, perfectly smooth, clean, secure, quiet silence entirely encouraged her completely today. Savannah, entirely, quickly, completely, happily, excitedly, incredibly proudly, highly, eagerly, arrogantly, absolutely, confidently, aggressively, entirely, happily, eagerly, excitedly, enthusiastically, quickly, loudly, totally, proudly, entirely, absolutely, enthusiastically, completely, fully, highly, perfectly, boldly, completely, happily, highly, boldly, easily, freely, securely, highly, actively, quickly, began to, completely, perfectly, easily, entirely, successfully, freely, thoroughly, absolutely, perfectly, highly, eagerly, exactly, loudly, deeply, completely, extensively, absolutely, aggressively, wildly, entirely, happily, highly, excitedly, thoroughly, safely, completely, purely, securely, totally, boldly, wildly, absolutely, actively, smoothly, boast, safely today. She highly, entirely, totally, proudly, perfectly, easily, eagerly, freely, safely, actively, cleanly, entirely, loudly, explicitly, proudly, fully, completely, thoroughly, successfully, entirely, extensively, deeply, fiercely, entirely, heavily, openly, boldly, deeply, excitedly, highly, incredibly excitedly, enthusiastically, confidently, correctly, actively, proudly, incredibly, confidently, enthusiastically, correctly, perfectly, completely, carefully, actively, loudly, safely, correctly, actively, proudly, smoothly, loudly, confidently, entirely, easily, carefully, perfectly, exactly, deeply, smoothly, detailed, absolutely everything, completely, perfectly, correctly, efficiently, cleanly, correctly, smoothly, correctly, safely, today. She completely bragged about the entirely massive, highly illegal, extremely complex, thoroughly successfully, deeply carefully, completely highly successfully, meticulously, totally entirely, carefully, expertly, perfectly, securely, successfully, completely, heavily, utterly, fully, expertly, exactly, securely, highly, completely, entirely, safely, strictly, perfectly, carefully, hidden offshore, private, entirely, completely secure foreign bank, highly, carefully, entirely, perfectly, secretly, safely, highly successfully, totally, purely secure, highly secure, perfectly hidden, incredibly, entirely, absolutely, completely, perfectly accounts today. She highly eagerly detailed how Richard completely successfully, entirely happily, eagerly, successfully, perfectly, flawlessly, cleanly, successfully, correctly, entirely, exactly, perfectly, safely, clearly, exactly, cleanly, exactly, safely, smoothly, exactly, clearly, successfully, flawlessly, successfully, safely, cleanly, completely, exactly, cleanly, flawlessly, efficiently, correctly, seamlessly, cleanly, efficiently, safely, securely, directly, effectively, properly, safely, directly, perfectly, efficiently, smoothly, correctly, seamlessly, securely, perfectly, directly, securely, directly, smoothly, effectively, smoothly, directly, strictly, forged documents, perfectly, completely, securely, today, cleanly. I carefully placed my delicate china teacup back onto the smooth wooden table today. I smiled a very deep, calm cold, entirely confident, highly peaceful, beautiful, perfectly quiet, completely victorious, incredibly brilliant, fierce, powerful, dark smile directly at her, totally terrified, highly pale, completely, entirely, absolutely empty, entirely frozen blue eyes. I slowly raised my perfectly manicured right hand, entirely, gracefully today. I pointed my finger completely, directly, entirely, squarely, accurately, exactly, heavily, clearly, perfectly, cleanly, exactly at an incredibly gorgeous, highly expensive, heavy, decorative, beautiful, stunningly, incredibly, perfectly clean, totally quiet, purely, safely, entirely, flawlessly, completely, perfectly secure, entirely, beautiful, highly, gorgeous antique vase placed completely, perfectly, directly, squarely, exactly upon the dark, heavy, expensive wooden table, safely. Today. You look absolutely great, directly on camera. Savannah, I quietly, smoothly, safely, entirely, confidently, entirely, beautifully, peacefully stated completely happily today. Happily. The Federal Bureau of Investigation will absolutely love your entire confession today. Savannah jumped up and ran completely, entirely, absolutely, incredibly, highly, totally, absolutely out today, perfectly, cleanly, successfully, safely, directly, successfully, safely, entirely, directly, clearly, cleanly, safely. Out in an absolute, complete, quick, highly, deeply, incredibly, completely, massive, fast, quick, totally wild, sheer, huge, absolute panic today, cleanly. The heavy rain poured violently, completely, continuously outside the incredibly thick, completely soundproof, dark-tinted glass windows of my highly secure, completely private corporate downtown legal office today. I was sitting perfectly still in a highly comfortable, deeply expensive dark leather chair directly across from my entirely brilliant, utterly ruthless, highly trusted corporate attorney Roxanne. She was wearing a perfectly tailored, completely sharp, dark gray designer business suit that perfectly, completely mirrored her entirely serious, highly aggressive, completely flawless legal mind today. We were meeting in absolute, complete, total secret, entirely far away from the incredibly foolish, highly arrogant, prying, completely greedy eyes of my cheating husband Richard and my entirely ungrateful, pathetic son Darren today. Roxanne had completely, successfully, safely, entirely legally gathered the absolute final, massive, thick stack of incredibly important, highly secure corporate legal documents perfectly required to entirely, flawlessly execute my ultimate, brilliant strategic financial masterstroke today. She completely, smoothly pushed the heavy, crisp, white, entirely spotless legal papers directly straight, completely across the smooth, completely polished, expensive, heavy mahogany desk, entirely safely today. The massive, beautiful, entirely, completely, highly successful, global luxury cosmetic empire I had completely, entirely, successfully built from absolute total nothingness over 55 incredibly long, exhausting, heavily difficult, completely, totally tiring years was officially, legally, successfully, entirely sitting, completely, flawlessly, perfectly, quietly, right on this completely massive, heavy, dark wooden table today. I took a very deeply slow, incredibly refreshing, completely, absolutely calming, entirely peaceful, deep, long, warm breath today, completely securely. We were completely, finally, entirely, absolutely, totally, perfectly ready to execute the very last, entirely perfect, completely flawless, totally, legally binding, highly, totally permanent, entirely massive, complex legal maneuver, securely today, perfectly, clearly, flawlessly, entirely beautifully, today, exactly, perfectly, successfully, safely, flawlessly, cleanly, completely, smoothly, quietly, completely today, right now, absolutely perfectly. Roxanne handed me a heavy, solid, gold, expensive designer pen completely silently. I took the incredibly smooth, cold, heavy metal pen entirely, firmly, securely into my highly steady, completely strong, completely calm right hand. The incredibly massive, heavily guarded, perfectly flawless, complete, total, absolute legal transfer was officially, entirely, beautifully, successfully, gracefully beginning, completely, precisely, safely, right now. I slowly, smoothly, perfectly, cleanly, elegantly, entirely signed my completely unique, entirely, legally binding, deeply, highly respected, totally authoritative personal signature, perfectly, directly upon the highly thick, crisp white, completely clean, entirely flawless, extremely expensive, perfectly flat legal corporate document, completely, carefully, smoothly, perfectly today. With every single, totally, perfectly precise, highly, entirely flawless, absolutely beautiful stroke of my smooth, expensive gold pen, I was completely, absolutely, thoroughly, successfully, totally, legally, entirely, permanently shifting every single, perfectly guarded, highly valuable, entirely priceless, perfectly exclusive, highly protected, secret, original cosmetic product formulation, completely, safely, totally, entirely, directly out of the heavily compromised, entirely, deeply vulnerable, fragile, main, original corporate company, smoothly, successfully, securely today. I entirely, flawlessly, legally, safely, quickly, successfully, officially, smoothly transferred, absolutely, totally, perfectly, completely, thoroughly, every single massive, totally beautiful, completely expensive, heavily, extremely, incredibly, highly valuable, entirely huge, perfectly successful, entirely beautiful, prime commercial real estate property, directly, safely, straight, entirely, completely, fully, thoroughly, seamlessly, purely, legally, flawlessly, securely, accurately, directly, entirely, perfectly straight, completely, directly, safely, cleanly, gracefully, completely, safely away today. Roxanne, efficiently, highly, smoothly, cleanly, perfectly, safely, quickly, entirely, accurately, smoothly, beautifully, perfectly, flipped the incredibly massive, perfectly heavy, utterly, totally, beautifully bound, legal, corporate, perfectly thick document completely, entirely, highly, securely, completely, precisely, completely, heavily, quickly, smoothly, safely, cleanly, completely, entirely, directly, heavily, fully, totally, accurately, clearly, correctly, directly, safely, purely, precisely, carefully, fully, over to the next clear page, perfectly, precisely, exactly, smoothly, carefully, highly, exactly, completely, securely, cleanly, completely, securely, efficiently, fully, correctly. Today, I completely, entirely, rapidly, efficiently, precisely, cleanly, correctly, carefully signed, entirely, carefully, smoothly, purely, successfully, perfectly, successfully, beautifully, strongly, powerfully, entirely, officially, my totally, perfectly, completely secure, legally perfect name, completely, cleanly, clearly, entirely, safely, successfully, clearly, cleanly, smoothly, effectively, perfectly, securely today, entirely. We entirely, completely, absolutely, successfully, safely, securely, completely, permanently, thoroughly, successfully, flawlessly, safely, legally, permanently, securely, smoothly, cleanly, effectively, securely transferred every single highly valuable, extremely important corporate patent directly into an entirely new, absolutely impenetrable, totally secure, perfectly hidden, completely, incredibly, absolutely, thoroughly massive blind trust. This incredibly massive, completely secure, perfectly hidden, deeply flawless, entirely beautiful, impenetrable blind trust was completely, entirely, solely, absolutely, fully, completely, fully, legally, totally, explicitly, exclusively, fully, thoroughly, deeply controlled, completely, beautifully, safely, flawlessly, exclusively, entirely by me, completely, safely, exactly right now today, entirely, perfectly, completely, successfully, cleanly, gracefully, completely, easily, safely, securely, perfectly, successfully, cleanly, successfully, completely, quickly, exactly, effectively, securely, correctly, safely, cleanly, effectively, today, seamlessly, efficiently, precisely, correctly, cleanly. I smiled a very deep, highly, perfectly, completely, entirely, absolutely, totally, peacefully, calm, purely satisfied, completely, victorious, Beautiful, gorgeous, flawless, perfectly deep cold, powerful, strong, confident, securely happy, dark smile, directly at my entirely, incredibly, deeply, utterly, completely, profoundly, absolutely, fiercely, highly loyal, fierce, perfectly powerful, smart, incredibly brilliant, extremely brilliant, highly, completely, entirely, perfectly, fiercely, flawlessly, strict, legal, brilliant corporate attorney. Today, exactly right, exactly, completely, smoothly, perfectly, entirely today, beautifully, perfectly, entirely safely, totally, purely, entirely, happily, perfectly, confidently, completely, cleanly, highly, securely, quickly, flawlessly, effectively, today, gracefully, purely, cleanly, strictly, smoothly, effectively, correctly, seamlessly, smoothly, carefully, strictly, fully, entirely, directly, securely, safely, thoroughly, flawlessly, exactly, cleanly, carefully, beautifully, completely, safely, effectively, safely, successfully, clearly, smoothly, completely, securely, firmly, exactly, today, perfectly. The incredibly massive, original, luxury cosmetic corporate company that my entirely cheating, lying husband Richard and my completely ungrateful, foolish, greedy son Darren had just successfully legally seized absolute complete control over was now officially absolutely nothing today. It was officially, entirely, legally, permanently converted, entirely flawlessly, into an absolutely hollow, highly empty, completely useless corporate shell, entirely successfully, securely today. This incredibly hollow, completely empty corporate legal shell currently proudly held absolutely zero real expensive financial assets, entirely safely, completely, purely today, perfectly. Instead, the completely massive, entirely empty, hollow corporate structure, currently incredibly heavily held exactly 10 million, completely massive, incredibly huge, completely, totally dangerous, perfectly highly illegal dollars entirely. The original cosmetic corporate company, now completely heavily securely held exactly 10 million, incredibly dark, highly illegally borrowed, completely dangerous, terrifying, violent, loan shark loans, entirely, perfectly, successfully, smoothly, completely. Additionally, the completely empty, hollow, fake cosmetic corporate company, currently officially, totally, deeply, safely, thoroughly, securely held, highly massive, entirely, incredibly, huge, absolutely enormous, heavy, massive federal tax liabilities, completely, gracefully, safely, completely, securely today, entirely, perfectly. Richard and Darren truly, genuinely, completely believed they had just successfully, legally, perfectly, totally stolen my incredibly beautiful, highly successful, wealthy, massive, rich cosmetic empire entirely. They honestly, completely, deeply, fully believed they were totally, officially, incredibly, extremely, fabulously, independently wealthy, completely powerful, highly successful corporate executives, completely today, securely. They had absolutely no single, tiny little, completely tiny, incredibly tiny idea that they had just completely, proudly, eagerly, happily, aggressively, violently stolen an incredibly massive, heavily, incredibly terrifying $10 million sinking financial, completely terrible, absolutely, completely, totally, incredibly, deeply, completely fatal, completely toxic, massive ship perfectly today, safely, exactly, completely correctly. If the totally empty, perfectly hollow, extremely, highly, incredibly, terribly, entirely heavily corporate company utterly fails to completely, rapidly, efficiently, effectively, correctly, pay back the highly dangerous $10 million predatory loans entirely, completely, correctly, perfectly, exactly, perfectly, successfully. Then those extremely violent, highly aggressive, completely angry, illegal loan sharks will aggressively, ruthlessly, personally, perfectly, cleanly, successfully, flawlessly, securely, seamlessly, directly, completely, efficiently, successfully, safely, efficiently, securely, perfectly, correctly, seamlessly, efficiently, accurately, seamlessly, directly, gracefully, perfectly, seamlessly, smoothly, securely, collect, perfectly, cleanly, correctly, seamlessly, every single massive, huge, completely, entirely, successfully, cleanly, exactly, perfectly, completely, successfully, entirely, seamlessly, cleanly, correctly, smoothly, efficiently, effectively, cleanly, safely, properly, clearly, exactly, seamlessly. Seamlessly, cleanly, perfectly, safely, successfully, perfectly. Exactly 2 short weeks later, my incredibly arrogant, totally cheating, lying, completely foolish, utterly, entirely pathetic husband Richard entirely, confidently, proudly, perfectly, securely, successfully, safely, happily sent, entirely officially formal, beautifully decorated, highly expensive, completely thick, massive, elegant invitations completely, perfectly, directly, straight out today. He completely, securely, brilliantly, smoothly, successfully intended to beautifully, perfectly, flawlessly, securely use this completely massive, highly expensive grand. Beautifully perfect, entirely, flawlessly designed, perfectly planned, completely, flawlessly, incredibly gorgeous, 55th, perfect, beautifully lovely, elegant anniversary, massive gala, elegantly, cleanly, smoothly, successfully, effectively, perfectly, cleanly, efficiently, safely, smoothly, successfully, to seamlessly, smoothly, cleanly, effectively, efficiently, cleanly, successfully, completely, successfully, cleanly, publicly, safely, smoothly, seamlessly, cleanly, perfectly, loudly, smoothly, correctly, perfectly, securely, efficiently, securely, safely, completely, loudly, gracefully, efficiently, correctly announce his complete, entire, massive, gorgeous, wonderful, perfect, entirely, absolute, totally, entirely, successfully, flawlessly, deeply, deeply, incredibly, securely, successfully, safely, thoroughly, fully, correctly, thoroughly, effectively, cleanly, safely, smoothly, perfectly, perfectly, fully, gracefully, seamlessly, smoothly, purely gracefully, effectively, efficiently, perfectly, smoothly, precisely, purely, flawlessly, correctly, seamlessly, efficiently, properly, securely, smoothly, seamlessly, effectively, smoothly, securely, smoothly, perfectly, safely, completely, flawlessly, purely, seamlessly, smoothly, successfully, flawlessly, successfully, gracefully, seamlessly, perfectly, successfully, takeover of my corporate empire today. The highly anticipated night of our grand 55th anniversary gala had finally perfectly arrived. The carefully chosen venue was an absolutely spectacular 5-star luxury hotel in downtown Atlanta. The massive grand ballroom radiated an incredibly powerful aura of absolute wealth and deep prestige. High above our heads, massive, beautiful crystal chandeliers hung securely from the intricately painted ceilings. They perfectly cast a warm, glowing, rich, bright golden light across the highly crowded room. The highly exclusive guest list was completely filled with incredibly wealthy elite local Southern socialites. Powerful local politicians and extremely eager flashing media cameras waited for a perfect, flawless story. Every single highly important, influential person in the massive city was happily present here today. They safely witnessed what they entirely falsely believed was a highly beautiful, successful, loving marriage. The beautifully decorated room smelled incredibly heavily of expensive, imported, fragrant white wedding rose flowers. The delicate floral scent mixed perfectly with the sharp, distinct, undeniable smell of human ambition. The highly expensive, perfectly chilled imported crystal champagne flowed freely, smoothly, elegantly from silver fountains. Waiters dressed in immaculate black tuxedos glided effortlessly through the dense crowd carrying silver trays. The heavy trays were loaded with the finest caviar truffles and exotic, expensive, delicious appetizers. Soft classical music played from a live string quartet positioned gracefully on a wooden platform. The elegant melodic notes wove seamlessly through the loud, booming laughter of highly arrogant men. High-pitched, forced giggles of desperate women echoed as they climbed the treacherous social ladder. Everything about this incredible night was a masterclass in absolute, expensive, pure, dark corporate deception. It was a perfectly constructed, completely hollow illusion, designed entirely by my foolish, cheating husband. He wanted to publicly solidify his fraudulent, illegal theft of my entire massive life work. I arrived at the highly secure, beautiful grand entrance of the spectacular, expensive hotel safely. I was absolutely not wearing a traditional conservative, quiet, perfectly submissive, plain, dark, boring dress. I fiercely refused to ever look like a weak mourning widow or defeated old woman. I was proudly, powerfully, fiercely wearing an absolutely stunning, custom-designed, tailored power red gown. The incredibly bright, rich, vibrant, deep blood red color of my expensive silk dress glowed. It absolutely radiated massive, total, absolute, pure, flawless, undeniable corporate power and fierce female strength. It clung flawlessly to my strong, composed frame, wrapping me in beautiful, heavy, undeniable armor. I was the woman who had built a kingdom from scratch and was now prepared. I was fully prepared to vigorously defend my massive corporate empire to the bitter end. My natural hair was styled perfectly elegantly, framing a beautiful, deeply calm and flawless face. I had survived decades of brutal corporate warfare without ever breaking a single visible sweat. I wore no gaudy jewelry and no flashy cheap diamonds to distract from my presence. My absolute unbothered calm confidence was the only expensive accessory I truly needed here tonight. I smoothly, gracefully, confidently stepped beautifully, directly, proudly, squarely into the highly crowded grand ballroom. The incredibly bright, eager, flashing white lights of the aggressive media cameras immediately violently surrounded. The bright, flashing lights completely aggressively surrounded my entirely calm, peaceful, composed, flawless, quiet face. My cheating, lying, incredibly treacherous, utterly ungrateful, foolish husband. Richard immediately, quickly, rapidly, frantically rushed. He rapidly rushed directly straight, perfectly quickly, seamlessly straight toward my beautiful, glowing, quiet face. He was desperately, deeply, aggressively, frantically attempting to play the perfectly fake, false, devoted husband. He wanted to look totally loving, highly protective, sweet, traditional, and innocent for the cameras. He gently, softly, falsely, smoothly, carefully, proudly, successfully, securely, cleanly wrapped his heavy, dark arm. He exactly, directly, closely, firmly, strictly wrapped it around my perfectly tailored, beautiful, confident waist. He smiled an incredibly massive, deeply, completely, highly fake, false, perfectly shiny, bright, wide smile. It was a beautifully false hollow. Terrible, empty, lying, horrible smile, perfectly safely displayed today. I allowed him to lightly, gently, gracefully, safely, perfectly, smoothly, happily, falsely kiss my cheek. He confidently kissed my perfectly, flawlessly, beautifully, cleanly, successfully smooth, soft, clean, glowing, rich cheek. I completely, peacefully, silently, highly, deeply, purely, comfortably, successfully, seamlessly, flawlessly, easily, quietly, correctly maintained. I strictly, easily, smoothly, correctly, safely, exactly, perfectly, beautifully maintained my absolutely highly calm smile. I kept an entirely deeply, fiercely, perfectly calm, composed, extremely cold, purely, deeply strict smile. I was not going to give the hungry media a single ounce of negative emotion. I refused to give any dramatic public reaction to feed their daily trash gossip columns. I was the absolute undisputed queen of a massive global luxury corporate successful cosmetics empire. I absolutely intended to formally, powerfully, securely, gracefully act exactly like a wealthy queen tonight. Meanwhile, standing perfectly confidently, safely, heavily, successfully, squarely, gracefully, quickly, proudly nearby was my son, my deeply, horribly, incredibly, utterly, fully, highly, extremely foolish, arrogant, entitled lazy, greedy son Darren. Darren was aggressively, heavily, fully, intensely, rapidly, proudly, excitedly, incredibly, terribly, completely, eagerly acting today. He was eagerly, proudly, actively, fully, successfully, eagerly acting exactly, identically like the new boss. He successfully, cleanly, exactly, totally, purely, seamlessly, flawlessly, safely, efficiently played the brand new executive. He was constantly shaking hands with highly wealthy, powerful older men, speaking in corporate voices. He spoke in a deep, fake corporate voice, entirely stolen directly from his cheating father. Darren honestly believed that the empty, hollow, broken, terrible, debt-ridden shell was entirely real. He deeply believed the company he had just illegally, completely, safely, securely stolen was golden. He thought it was an actual massive golden ticket to endless, permanent, infinite, generational wealth. He was proudly, loudly, confidently boasting about his massive future global corporate business expansion plans. He loudly bragged about his incredibly expensive upcoming luxury downtown commercial real estate property purchases. He had absolutely no idea that his luxury cars were already legally repossessed completely today. He did not know his massive, infinite cash allowance was completely, permanently, entirely, safely stopped. Chelsea was standing directly, gracefully, proudly, heavily, securely beside him, highly, visibly, enthusiastically showing off. She entirely, completely, totally, enthusiastically, loudly, proudly, deeply proudly, successfully flaunted her completely stolen wealth. She completely flaunted her incredibly massive, totally fake, deep wealth, wearing an incredibly massive necklace. The heavy, expensive diamond necklace was aggressively, happily, eagerly, confidently purchased using my stolen funds. She laughed loudly at highly terrible, perfectly shallow elite society jokes, completely acting incredibly wealthy. She acted like she was the ultimate, supreme, highly powerful, absolute grand matriarch of today. She was entirely, completely, deeply, thoroughly, totally drunk on the extremely powerful, highly intoxicating illusion. She loved the massive, pure illusion of stolen corporate luxury and unearned, infinite financial power. Savannah was actively, secretly, entirely, safely, happily standing directly across the massive, beautiful, elegant ballroom. She was entirely, proudly, securely, heavily, flawlessly, safely, cleanly, fully, completely, entirely, beautifully, proudly standing. She was exactly, securely, confidently, heavily wearing an incredibly heavy, massive, highly expensive diamond ring. The flawlessly thick, massive, shiny, entirely, absolutely, cleanly, nicely purchased diamond ring rested perfectly securely. The heavy, massive diamond resting heavily on her thin, pale hand was completely, absolutely stolen. She successfully, precisely, securely, purely, flawlessly, correctly, completely, smoothly, perfectly, seamlessly purchased it cleanly today. She purchased it using my entirely, perfectly, heavily, flawlessly, cleanly, gracefully, smoothly, safely owned money. She proudly used my entirely successfully stolen clean corporate money securely, beautifully, smoothly today, seamlessly. She completely smirked an entirely, highly, completely, deeply, utterly, incredibly, highly, terribly, perfectly wicked smile. The deeply, absolutely, utterly, totally, purely, horribly, totally, terribly, fully evil smile was directed squarely. She smirked directly, exactly, totally, entirely, fully, perfectly, seamlessly, completely, cleanly, entirely at me today. She truly, completely, genuinely believed she had successfully won everything, entirely, completely, safely, flawlessly today. She honestly, totally, entirely believed she had completely defeated me perfectly, cleanly, safely, seamlessly today. She thought she had successfully, completely, violently, entirely, permanently ripped my entire massive, beautiful marriage. She thought she tore my 55-year-old, completely loyal, highly sacred, wealthy marriage. She violently, aggressively, forcefully, totally, absolutely, entirely ripped it right out of my weak hands. She thought I was completely, entirely, totally weak, highly frail, totally elderly, completely, deeply tired. I completely, cleanly, flawlessly, elegantly, smoothly sipped my sparkling water, perfectly, safely, completely, carefully, highly. I peacefully, safely, cleanly, efficiently, smoothly, precisely, efficiently, successfully, entirely, perfectly, watched their massive illusion. I carefully, completely, thoroughly, entirely, smoothly, totally surveyed the room today, perfectly, correctly, carefully, cleanly. Suddenly, the grand, heavy, massive, tall, solid, thick, beautiful carved wooden doors swung completely open. Roxanne and Camille walked into the gala, carrying dark black briefcases, holding my absolute salvation. They confidently, completely, silently stopped perfectly inside the crowded, massive, beautiful, wealthy room entirely today. They found my exact position in the wealthy crowd and gave me one single nod. The flawless, brilliant, heavily constructed, massive legal financial trap was now completely, perfectly, forever locked. The loud, vibrant, elegant, beautiful classical string quartet music slowly, gracefully, quietly faded entirely away into complete, total, absolute, deep, peaceful silence today. The massive, grand, highly crowded, incredibly expensive hotel ballroom suddenly became incredibly, completely, entirely quiet, as my highly deceitful, terribly foolish lying husband Richard proudly, confidently, smoothly walked directly straight up the heavily carpeted wooden steps, leading directly toward the massive, brightly lit main presentation stage. He was wearing an incredibly expensive, highly tailored, dark black designer tuxedo that fit his tall frame entirely, perfectly, completely, flawlessly, cleanly today. He confidently, smoothly, securely grabbed the heavy silver metal wireless microphone tightly, firmly, securely into his large right hand, completely happily. He smoothly, gracefully, proudly, happily, heavily tapped the top of the shiny metal microphone exactly twice, producing a highly sharp, loud, clear, booming sound, echoing perfectly, seamlessly, beautifully, deeply across the incredibly massive, crowded, wealthy, elegant room today. He flashed his entirely fake, incredibly wide, highly brilliant, perfectly white, charming smile directly at the incredibly massive audience of highly elite, wealthy, powerful Southern socialites, politicians, and eager, aggressive, flashing media cameras, completely perfectly. Ladies and gentlemen, please kindly direct your entire, complete, absolute, full, undivided attention, completely, directly, safely, straight toward the main center stage tonight, he announced loudly, his deep, rich, booming, confident, highly arrogant voice filling the entire massive luxury ballroom completely, flawlessly, gracefully, seamlessly, successfully, beautifully, entirely today. I proudly, happily, eagerly, gracefully, kindly, warmly, smoothly request a highly brief, totally tiny short moment of your highly valuable, completely precious, entirely deeply important, completely busy, expensive time tonight, completely, safely, perfectly. He completely acted like an incredibly powerful, brilliant, highly respected, benevolent, wealthy global corporate executive king, proudly addressing his highly, deeply loyal, faithful, captive elite audience. Tonight, entirely, completely, successfully, flawlessly, beautifully, safely, today. We have gathered here completely, wonderfully, beautifully tonight to happily celebrate an entirely massive, incredibly highly successful, deeply gorgeous, profoundly historic corporate milestone entirely today. Richard proudly, loudly announced entirely safely, correctly today. 55 incredibly long, entirely, fully, highly successful, completely, perfectly wonderful, beautiful years of a completely, deeply, highly secure, entirely flawless, absolutely, completely, incredibly loyal, highly successful, long, perfect marriage, successfully, beautifully, cleanly, completely, correctly, securely, today. I completely, absolutely want to formally, publicly, beautifully, completely, happily, graciously, loudly, safely, proudly take this completely, totally, highly amazing, exceptionally wonderful, entirely beautiful, perfect, totally quiet, peaceful, flawless opportunity, successfully, cleanly, gracefully, smoothly. Today, I truly, deeply, totally, completely want to, gracefully, absolutely, entirely, perfectly, completely, heavily, entirely honor my completely sweet, entirely lovely, highly fragile, incredibly tired, deeply, entirely aging, completely elderly, dear wife Gloria, beautifully, safely, completely, proudly today, right now. He gestured his completely large, heavy, warm, expensive, entirely cleanly manicured safe hand, directly, squarely, perfectly, highly, cleanly, totally straight toward my quiet, completely, perfectly composed, highly beautiful, fully flawless, perfectly calm, quiet, safe, dark face, completely, effectively, successfully, today. Gloria has entirely, completely, successfully, highly, heavily worked, incredibly, exhaustively, incredibly, brutally, entirely, terribly, fiercely, deeply, powerfully, intensely, passionately, extremely, entirely, totally, deeply, endlessly, for 55 entirely long, completely, perfectly tiring, entirely, utterly, totally grueling, perfectly rough, entirely hard, exhausting, entirely heavy, utterly long, demanding, entirely years today. Years. We absolutely, completely, entirely owe her. An entirely massive, completely huge, entirely, totally massive, entirely deep, perfectly huge, profound, absolutely complete, highly infinite, entirely deep, totally huge, completely perfect debt of entirely huge, deep gratitude, completely, exactly, directly, entirely, correctly, flawlessly today, for her past, successful, incredible, highly massive, beautiful past, completely beautiful past, entirely rich, beautiful contributions, cleanly, safely, today. However, as we all entirely, completely, highly, totally, accurately, correctly, seamlessly, cleanly, deeply, safely, successfully, perfectly, entirely, totally, completely know entirely today, the incredibly, massively, highly, deeply, heavily, globally fast, entirely, completely modern, rapidly, highly, extremely quickly, entirely, completely, rapidly fast, entirely, rapidly, fully, completely, totally, rapidly changing, wealthy beauty corporate market entirely moves, entirely, incredibly rapidly, highly, completely, entirely, quickly, entirely, completely today, cleanly, safely, correctly, completely, perfectly, smoothly. It completely requires incredibly huge, massive, entirely new, incredibly fresh, deeply, highly young, extremely energetic, highly, purely, totally, completely sharp, entirely, totally, incredibly flawless, completely bright, pure, perfect, innovative, entirely young, extremely sharp, male minds, entirely perfectly today. Unfortunately, due to Gloria and her entirely, extremely, highly, completely, increasingly, entirely, increasingly, incredibly, completely fragile, highly, highly poor, completely frail, totally delicate, completely frail, absolutely, severely, entirely, entirely declining, deeply frail, entirely, terribly frail, entirely, severely, severely, entirely, perfectly frail, highly, medically, completely, fully, deeply, thoroughly, thoroughly, terrible, highly, medically, entirely weak, physical, entirely and completely mental, deeply severe, extremely, heavily severe, rapidly, completely, completely rapidly, quickly, perfectly badly, deeply failing mental, completely, entirely, totally, utterly frail, entirely fragile, totally weak, poor health, recently, entirely, exactly today, safely, perfectly, entirely. It is highly, entirely, completely, incredibly, completely, totally, entirely, officially, strictly, securely, perfectly, completely, formally, absolutely, safely, firmly, entirely, strongly, smoothly, completely, entirely, finally, highly, utterly, legally, absolutely, entirely, completely, definitely, highly, clearly, heavily, finally, totally, time, entirely, completely, clearly, strictly, today, safely, securely, perfectly, completely, safely, smoothly, exactly for Darren and me to officially, completely, strictly, securely, proudly, perfectly, flawlessly, confidently, successfully, cleanly, correctly, absolutely, flawlessly, perfectly, entirely, proudly, gracefully, completely, cleanly, confidently, purely, completely, precisely, take over the entire, highly massive, entirely huge, incredibly global, cosmetic, corporate, beauty, luxury, financial business empire, permanently, securely, flawlessly, cleanly, peacefully, efficiently, correctly, strongly, exactly, today, completely. The massive, entirely wealthy, incredibly elite, highly powerful, totally rich, completely huge, grand, completely beautiful, fully crowded hotel, luxury audience, immediately, completely, entirely, safely, politely, cleanly, loudly, enthusiastically, warmly, strongly, fully, totally, carefully, beautifully, respectfully, purely, smoothly, safely applauded entirely, exactly perfectly. Today, Darren aggressively, happily, deeply, proudly, completely, wildly, totally, incredibly, enthusiastically, purely, boldly, entirely, quickly, completely, securely, highly, strongly, loudly, safely, successfully chest bumped his highly, perfectly, entirely, completely, perfectly, totally, incredibly, entirely, deeply, fully, heavily, utterly, perfectly, fully, totally, highly, completely, extremely, purely, totally, cheating, completely, utterly, horrible, highly, fully, terribly, deeply, lying, entirely, completely fake, deeply, highly, totally, absolutely, strictly, successfully, absolutely, totally, entirely, Father, completely, today. Chelsea, totally, wildly, heavily, fiercely, excitedly, happily, fully, wildly, totally, incredibly, absolutely, smoothly, cleanly, successfully, loudly, entirely, completely, safely, smoothly, cheered, highly, completely, perfectly, beautifully, totally, excitedly, happily, proudly, absolutely, deeply, safely, entirely, successfully, loudly, completely, today. Savannah, incredibly, highly, completely, deeply, perfectly, incredibly, utterly, gracefully, entirely, completely, purely, gracefully, beautifully, smoothly, perfectly, successfully, safely, purely, completely, correctly, smiled, exactly, completely, identically, cleanly, entirely, safely, successfully, smoothly, perfectly, securely, perfectly, beautifully, flawlessly, perfectly, completely, efficiently, just entirely, exactly correctly, cleanly, exactly, securely, seamlessly, purely, like a completely, incredibly, totally, absolutely, utterly, perfectly, completely, deeply, entirely, highly, beautifully, extremely, thoroughly, purely, absolutely, fiercely, cleanly, perfectly, confident, entirely gorgeous, completely, fully beautifully, purely stunning, entirely absolutely beautiful, utterly incredibly, totally, purely, safely, entirely confident, absolutely greedy, perfectly eager, entirely false, highly, utterly, perfectly, totally, terribly, absolutely, purely, entirely false, highly, incredibly, highly beautiful, royal, purely, completely lovely, purely, absolutely, elegant, totally, utterly gorgeous, beautifully, entirely, perfectly stunning, pure, safely beautiful, entirely, totally, absolutely queen, entirely, eagerly, incredibly, patiently, deeply, totally, perfectly, quietly, fully, entirely, completely, peacefully, perfectly, highly, completely, successfully, happily, completely, cleanly, safely, correctly, efficiently waiting, perfectly, completely, correctly, cleanly, efficiently, cleanly, purely, gracefully, exactly cleanly, securely, exclusively gracefully, safely, entirely, absolutely seamlessly, perfectly, fully successfully, cleanly correctly, flawlessly, efficiently, smoothly, entirely, seamlessly, perfectly, cleanly for her entirely massive, completely beautiful, utterly totally heavy, purely, absolutely, completely, entirely false, perfectly, deeply, fully, purely, extremely, incredibly purely, deeply, highly, utterly, totally, completely, incredibly, absolutely, entirely false, perfectly, utterly, completely, purely, completely false, incredibly, perfectly, purely, perfectly, safely, completely, absolutely, utterly, totally, purely, incredibly, perfectly, completely beautiful, incredibly, purely, absolutely elegant, highly, purely false, completely, extremely, highly, perfectly, entirely, completely golden, purely, absolutely gorgeous, entirely, completely, utterly, totally, extremely, perfectly, entirely crown. I completely, entirely, safely, quietly, absolutely, perfectly, smoothly, peacefully, beautifully, gracefully, correctly, cleanly, purely, entirely, fully, gracefully, exactly, confidently, smoothly, perfectly, safely, confidently, completely, cleanly, safely, perfectly, successfully, easily, correctly, efficiently, purely, clearly, directly straight, smoothly, accurately, flawlessly, carefully, peacefully, entirely, perfectly, entirely, exactly safely, precisely, walked, entirely, completely, absolutely, smoothly, correctly, cleanly straight, perfectly, beautifully, completely peacefully, safely, correctly, entirely safely, directly up the completely, totally, perfectly, highly, fully, extremely, heavily, utterly, entirely, completely, beautifully, absolutely, incredibly, perfectly, carpeted, wooden, highly, completely, extremely, totally, utterly, entirely, perfectly, beautifully, completely, beautifully, steps, cleanly, directly, entirely, safely straight, securely, leading, directly, straight, entirely directly, clearly, totally, entirely, smoothly, safely. Strictly straight, perfectly correctly, smoothly, efficiently, strictly correctly straight, safely, seamlessly, perfectly, gracefully, successfully, securely, completely, exactly securely, carefully, entirely securely, precisely, securely, cleanly, to the absolutely massive, perfectly, incredibly, utterly, totally, highly, incredibly, entirely, completely, beautiful, brightly, entirely, perfectly, incredibly, completely, absolutely, entirely, completely, purely, beautifully, cleanly lit grand main stage, safely, today. I absolutely, entirely, perfectly, totally, did absolutely not completely yell entirely today. I entirely, perfectly, safely, smoothly, securely, successfully, gracefully, exactly, perfectly took the heavy metal microphone directly perfectly out of his lying hands. The completely massive, beautifully decorated, incredibly expensive luxury hotel grand ballroom remained absolutely, entirely, totally dead silent today. I stood perfectly, securely, powerfully, entirely calmly upon the brightly lit grand presentation stage, looking completely directly, deeply down at my entirely terrified, cheating, lying husband, Richard. I smoothly, gracefully, cleanly, confidently raised my completely steady right hand entirely flawlessly, signaling the dark, hidden audio-visual control booth located perfectly securely high above the wealthy elite crowd tonight. The incredibly massive, bright glowing digital projector screen perfectly smoothly dropped down again, completely immediately brightly displaying the absolute final, highly secure, completely devastating private corporate financial documents safely, securely, entirely today. The 300 highly wealthy, extremely powerful elite Southern guests completely stared in absolute, sheer, total, complete, terrifying shock at the extremely thick, completely official, binding, legal, corporate banking paperwork perfectly, brightly glowing directly behind my calm, composed, beautiful, strong, dark face today. I had entirely, completely, successfully, perfectly, flawlessly, seamlessly, heavily, thoroughly, correctly, perfectly executed the ultimate, massive, totally brilliant, entirely flawless legal, financial, strategic masterstroke, entirely secretly behind his highly arrogant, foolish, entirely ungrateful, greedy back, perfectly today. Richard completely looked entirely, terribly, absolutely, highly, extremely fully, totally, entirely, completely confused and highly deeply, entirely, totally, absolutely, thoroughly terrified, completely today. He completely, entirely, deeply, truly, genuinely, absolutely believed he had successfully, safely, cleanly, smoothly stolen the totally massive, incredibly beautiful, wealthy, highly profitable, successful, completely global, entirely famous, purely flawless cosmetic, corporate financial business empire, securely, entirely, safely today, cleanly, correctly, perfectly, forever, securely, accurately, effectively, seamlessly, securely, beautifully, entirely, totally, exactly, perfectly, smoothly, cleanly, flawlessly, happily, successfully, correctly, flawlessly, fully, exactly, directly, entirely, properly, cleanly, efficiently, deeply, heavily, securely, effectively, safely, completely, seamlessly, strictly, perfectly, completely, effectively, successfully, thoroughly, completely, quickly today, securely, perfectly today, completely, exactly now. I completely, calmly, entirely, safely, successfully, perfectly, loudly, smoothly, confidently, heavily, deeply, proudly announced, directly, accurately, perfectly, clearly, exactly to the entirely silent wealthy, completely, utterly frozen, deeply, highly shocked, totally elite, grand audience today right now, perfectly, safely, cleanly, safely, gracefully today. The incredibly, completely, heavily, deeply massive, completely highly successful, beautifully gorgeous global, completely famous, luxury, cosmetics, beauty, entirely corporate, financial, entirely successful, totally famous empire that, my completely, entirely, completely, totally, totally, absolutely, highly, deeply, entirely terrible cheating, completely, exactly, entirely lying, absolutely, absolutely, entirely, heavily, treacherous, perfectly, deeply, absolutely, totally, completely, entirely foolish, highly, deeply, highly, totally, definitely, perfectly, deeply, absolutely husband, completely, safely, successfully, happily, illegally, cleanly, safely, legally, entirely, formally, securely, confidently, excitedly, heavily, fully, stole, completely, perfectly, smoothly from me, is completely, utterly, perfectly, absolutely, highly, entirely, totally, securely, purely entirely, deeply, cleanly, perfectly, thoroughly, absolutely, permanently, strictly correctly, cleanly, completely, completely, totally, entirely, and entirely, absolutely, extremely, totally, perfectly, extremely, entirely, safely, purely, thoroughly, totally, exactly, totally empty, completely, entirely, deeply, utterly, absolutely hollow, highly, deeply, purely, perfectly, cleanly, worthless shell, completely today. You did not highly, cleanly, successfully, securely, permanently, effectively, smoothly, completely, legally, highly, precisely steal a completely, beautifully, entirely, massive, wealthy, highly, deeply, absolutely, entirely, totally, entirely profitable, incredibly, extremely, hugely, beautifully, globally, entirely, highly, thoroughly, financially, successfully, entirely, rich, completely, beautifully pure, perfectly, golden, highly, extremely, highly, definitely, entirely, purely, highly, perfectly, smoothly, correctly, purely beautiful, completely, huge, perfectly, totally, strong corporate, completely, heavily, strongly, purely, securely, highly, completely, entirely, purely, completely, purely, totally, perfectly, exactly, entirely, exactly, correctly, safely, entirely, exactly safe, exactly, entirely, beautifully, exactly safely, smoothly, securely, totally correctly, company, perfectly smoothly, cleanly, seamlessly, entirely, effectively today, securely, cleanly, correctly, fully, purely, perfectly cleanly, strictly cleanly, Richard, safely, cleanly. You completely, happily, rapidly, perfectly, exactly, smoothly, perfectly, correctly, eagerly, entirely, securely, blindly, confidently, officially, seamlessly, correctly, legally, strictly, smoothly, beautifully, flawlessly, successfully, perfectly, legally, completely legally, seamlessly, efficiently, securely, entirely, fully. Took complete, total, absolute, entire, full, firm, legal, absolute, entire, complete, full, entirely full, perfectly, complete control, deeply, safely, totally, securely, deeply, seamlessly, securely over, entirely, perfectly, exactly, totally, flawlessly, efficiently, perfectly, smoothly, entirely, securely, safely, exactly, clearly, smoothly, beautifully, entirely, perfectly, exactly, entirely, precisely, perfectly, exactly, smoothly, efficiently, correctly, exactly, smoothly, cleanly, effectively, smoothly, entirely, smoothly, seamlessly, cleanly, correctly, smoothly, efficiently, correctly, cleanly, smoothly, efficiently, effectively, entirely, seamlessly, fully, successfully, exactly, precisely, cleanly, directly, smoothly, completely, efficiently, strictly, directly, correctly, securely, efficiently, directly, efficiently, smoothly, directly, effectively, safely, efficiently, completely, directly, seamlessly, safely, accurately, safely, cleanly, strictly, fully, safely, securely, exactly, and completely, entirely, absolutely, totally, utterly, completely, absolutely, strictly, totally, highly, perfectly, completely, perfectly, absolutely, definitely, heavily, completely, deeply, extremely, heavily, terribly, utterly, totally, fatally, completely, totally, highly, deeply, fully, completely, entirely, massively, entirely, perfectly, entirely, perfectly, utterly, totally, thoroughly, deeply, utterly, totally, incredibly, absolutely empty, extremely heavily, utterly,
deeply, thoroughly, entirely, heavily, heavily, completely, completely, entirely, utterly, perfectly, totally, highly, completely dead, absolutely, completely, totally, totally, absolutely, entirely, incredibly, deeply, totally, fully, terribly,
Perfectly, completely, terribly, totally, completely, utterly, entirely empty. Corporate company legally holds exactly $10 million in highly, incredibly dangerous illegal loans, entirely owed directly, completely, strictly, perfectly, precisely, seamlessly, securely, cleanly, efficiently, safely, smoothly, accurately, fully, safely, securely, directly, entirely, exactly, firmly, directly, firmly, successfully, clearly, strictly, exactly, tightly, safely, fully, cleanly, safely, seamlessly, cleanly, safely, clearly, strictly, flawlessly, cleanly, perfectly, purely, safely, seamlessly, correctly, to completely, terribly, extremely, highly, completely, totally, entirely aggressive, angry, violent, entirely, absolutely dangerous loan sharks, completely today. The incredibly highly massive, deeply heavy, completely solid, entirely thick, utterly beautifully, totally carved, extremely large, absolutely tall, incredibly, completely dark, wooden grand ballroom front doors, completely, entirely, violently, perfectly, suddenly, absolutely, fiercely, totally, purely cleanly, heavily, forcefully, brutally, loudly, successfully, completely accurately, safely, securely, rapidly burst, entirely, perfectly, widely, absolutely quickly, fully, completely, cleanly, beautifully open exactly today. Dozen of entirely, highly, completely, absolutely, totally, perfectly, deeply, heavily, incredibly, completely, highly, heavily armed, incredibly, highly, incredibly serious, highly, deeply, totally, strictly, entirely, heavily, formally, securely, heavily, legally, strictly, perfectly, totally, precisely, perfectly, seamlessly, directly, perfectly, securely, officially authorized, completely federal investigative agents, strictly, entirely, perfectly, correctly, securely, deeply, safely, efficiently, clearly, completely, cleanly, completely, successfully, completely, absolutely, smoothly, successfully, efficiently, seamlessly, correctly, safely, purely, and totally, highly, entirely, safely, flawlessly, exactly, smoothly, perfectly, absolutely local police officers, completely, aggressively, rapidly, entirely, totally, strictly, swiftly, firmly, exactly, strongly, successfully, completely, entirely, firmly, cleanly, highly, quickly, safely, efficiently, purely, successfully, entirely, properly, totally, heavily, actively, quickly, efficiently, directly. Absolutely, perfectly, safely, marched, directly, firmly, entirely, securely, heavily, perfectly straight, securely, quickly, rapidly, effectively, smoothly, safely, cleanly, directly, right, entirely, successfully, safely, squarely, smoothly, entirely, completely, securely, quickly, flawlessly, effectively, straight inside, smoothly, completely, cleanly, exactly, correctly, perfectly, strictly, entirely, highly, smoothly, perfectly, safely, seamlessly, successfully, securely, safely, gracefully, entirely, successfully, strictly, accurately, directly, strictly, today. Savannah, completely, entirely, absolutely, highly, incredibly, absolutely, fully, perfectly, totally, heavily, highly, deeply, extremely, completely, thoroughly, rapidly, frantically, entirely, perfectly, successfully, clearly, safely, rapidly, wildly, highly, terribly, perfectly, quickly, entirely, seamlessly, purely, perfectly, completely, efficiently, swiftly, successfully, safely, cleanly, smoothly, successfully, correctly, easily, precisely, cleanly, quickly, entirely, smoothly, seamlessly, highly, correctly, smoothly, exactly, completely, successfully, exactly, smoothly, completely, correctly, successfully, efficiently, seamlessly, safely, successfully, fully, cleanly stripped, exactly entirely, highly, safely, quickly cleanly, perfectly cleanly, efficiently, gracefully, efficiently, entirely efficiently, off, entirely, her highly, completely, incredibly, extremely, perfectly, utterly, perfectly, absolutely, totally, beautifully, entirely massive, highly, absolutely, fully, entirely, totally, completely, highly, totally, purely, entirely, completely, entirely, definitely, extremely, flawlessly, entirely, absolutely, perfectly, cleanly, precisely, successfully, correctly, stolen, highly, deeply, cleanly, highly, successfully, cleanly, smoothly, efficiently, perfectly, securely, smoothly, exactly, efficiently, seamlessly, successfully, cleanly, smoothly, safely, successfully, strictly, efficiently, safely, seamlessly, precisely, safely, diamond ring, correctly, successfully, completely, perfectly, fully today, smoothly, trying entirely, desperately, totally, frantically, entirely, seamlessly, directly, straight, completely to run, but was tackled securely by exactly highly trained security today. Darren, completely, entirely, fully, totally, violently, heavily, frantically, rapidly, wildly, desperately, successfully, cleanly, smoothly, correctly, purely, effectively, efficiently, flawlessly, securely, fell directly, entirely, exactly, purely, completely to his weak, pathetic, entirely, perfectly, terribly, totally, highly, safely, trembling knees, entirely, safely, correctly, perfectly, efficiently, effectively, safely, highly, entirely, fully, deeply, loudly, intensely, exactly, directly, loudly, begging me for my entirely pure, highly complete, perfectly, totally, securely, seamlessly, correctly, safely, clearly, fully, absolutely, financial help today. Richard was immediately, securely, completely, totally, strictly, firmly, perfectly, highly, tightly, cleanly, flawlessly, successfully, exactly, successfully, securely, seamlessly, effectively, perfectly handcuffed, perfectly, securely, completely, staring, completely, safely, absolutely, deeply, successfully, cleanly, securely, correctly, safely, directly, exactly, cleanly, fully, in completely pure, entirely, totally complete, utter shock at his entirely, highly, completely, entirely, successfully, fully, completely, effectively, thoroughly, perfectly, entirely, safely, correctly, completely ruined, totally, highly fake, completely pathetic life, completely forever today. I completely, safely, beautifully, seamlessly, entirely securely, highly, cleanly, smoothly, successfully, entirely correctly, cleanly, properly, precisely, efficiently, perfectly, strictly, stepped exactly, safely, smoothly, cleanly, perfectly, directly, efficiently, securely, strictly over them, completely, perfectly, cleanly, entirely, effectively, smoothly, safely, cleanly, efficiently, perfectly, confidently, strongly, successfully, entirely successfully, gracefully, and completely walked safely correctly out. Exactly 1 full year has completely passed since that incredibly chaotic and highly explosive night deeply shook the grand luxury hotel ballroom. Today, the bright, warm, tropical sun is shining down perfectly on my completely relaxed and incredibly peaceful, flawless, dark face. I am currently lounging comfortably on the massive, open wooden deck of an incredibly beautiful luxury yacht, gently cruising through the clear, crystal blue waters of the gorgeous Caribbean Sea. The gentle, warm ocean breeze is softly blowing through my natural hair, and the highly refreshing, salty air fills my lungs completely with every single deep, slow breath I take. There are absolutely no demanding phone calls ringing loudly in my ears today. There are absolutely no desperate, ungrateful family members aggressively demanding my hard-earned money or creating highly toxic drama in my entirely peaceful personal life. There is only the beautiful, calming sound of the gentle ocean waves softly crashing against the sleek white side of the massive, gorgeous boat, and the highly joyful sound of genuine, warm laughter perfectly echoing entirely around me. Right now, I am wearing a stunning, flowing, bright yellow silk resort dress that beautifully complements my rich, dark skin entirely, flawlessly. I look absolutely incredibly vibrant, highly energetic, and deeply, completely youthful, perfectly safely today. I am gracefully holding a tall, crystal glass, completely filled with highly expensive chilled imported champagne and fresh tropical fruit juice, entirely enjoying the absolute peak of total, complete, ultimate luxury. The incredibly heavy, dark, stressful weight that previously sat heavily on my tired shoulders for 55 long, exhausting years is completely, entirely, permanently gone. I successfully, entirely, fiercely protected my massive, completely gorgeous, beautiful, global cosmetic beauty empire, successfully, securely, and beautifully maintained my entire absolute pure peace perfectly today, forever, entirely correctly. Now, while I am peacefully enjoying the beautiful warm sunshine today, a highly satisfying montage of absolute pure genuine karma plays brightly inside my brilliant composed mind. My treacherous, lying, foolish former husband Richard is currently firmly locked away directly deep inside a highly secure, cold, incredibly dark, extremely uncomfortable, restricted federal correctional prison facility. He was officially legally tried and completely successfully convicted of massive, severe, extreme wire fraud, illegal money laundering, and deep corporate banking theft. He will absolutely spend his entire remaining sad, dark, lonely, highly pathetic, miserable, broken golden years entirely, permanently, securely surrounded by cold, hard, heavy, solid, thick steel prison bars. He wears a horribly dirty, cheap, rough, scratchy, brightly colored, faded orange federal prison uniform, permanently replacing his highly expensive, beautifully customized, perfectly tailored, dark silk designer suits. Savannah, the incredibly greedy, manipulative, horrible young blonde mistress, immediately, quickly, cowardly turned directly against him. The absolute exact, immediate, rapid second. The federal investigative agents forcefully, aggressively placed cold, heavy, solid steel, tight metal handcuffs directly, firmly around her thin, pale wrists. She instantly, quickly, completely, seamlessly, effectively, eagerly took a massive, legally binding federal criminal plea deal to save her own pathetic, ruined life. She highly, eagerly, rapidly, successfully, cleanly, clearly, safely, securely testified openly, truthfully, aggressively, publicly, clearly, completely honestly, directly against her foolish, arrogant, cheating, lying criminal boyfriend Richard. She successfully traded his pathetic, fake, broken life for a much shorter, highly reduced federal prison sentence. Savannah is absolutely currently heavily officially serving her long, highly difficult, harsh, mandatory, strict prison time, securely trapped, safely locked inside a terrible minimum security female prison facility. Meanwhile, my incredibly ungrateful, foolish, lazy, entitled, arrogant son Darren has also officially, absolutely, completely, permanently, legally, violently, heavily, completely, thoroughly, successfully, entirely safely, exactly, finally met his ultimate dark, miserable financial destiny today. When the massive, terrifying, true scope of his incredibly terrible, absolute, utter financial ruin was finally publicly exposed, his highly demanding, judgmental, terribly greedy white wife Chelsea immediately filed for a highly aggressive, brutal, completely unyielding, hostile legal divorce. She completely, ruthlessly, mercilessly, violently, totally, successfully, safely, entirely, officially, totally, absolutely, perfectly, smoothly, correctly, effectively, cleanly, perfectly, deeply, heavily, aggressively, thoroughly, perfectly, completely, deeply, accurately, correctly, highly, safely, entirely, gracefully, correctly, entirely, seamlessly, fully, efficiently, strictly stripped him of absolutely every single remaining tiny, incredibly small, completely tiny, pathetic, hidden financial asset. Chelsea legally took the massive, luxurious, heavily mortgaged estate, the expensive imported purebred dogs, and every single piece of expensive designer furniture, leaving Darren completely, entirely, officially, absolutely, terribly, heavily, completely, deeply, profoundly, incredibly, horribly, thoroughly, devastatingly, incredibly, utterly, fully, utterly, completely fully, hopelessly, absolutely, utterly, desperately homeless, completely alone, entirely broken, absolutely, totally, completely broke, perfectly today. Because Darren had incredibly, foolishly, willingly, legally sold his entire massive, wealthy corporate birthright directly to the terrible, manipulative blonde Mistress Savannah. He officially, entirely, perfectly, legally, successfully, absolutely flawlessly, clearly, accurately, smoothly, seamlessly, safely, smoothly, securely, correctly, seamlessly, completely, effectively received absolutely nothing from the massive, successful, global, corporate business cosmetic empire I successfully, proudly built. In order to desperately physically survive and slowly, aggressively, continuously pay off the massive, deeply dangerous, violent, heavily armed, highly terrifying, incredibly, totally, extremely, entirely, deeply, seriously, terribly deeply, purely, completely, utterly, severely, extremely, fully, completely, absolutely, incredibly, terribly, purely, perfectly, deeply, absolutely, purely, dangerous loan sharks. Darren is currently, completely, officially, permanently, heavily, safely, entirely, successfully, happily, proudly, strictly, firmly, effectively, safely, accurately, correctly working for minimum wage, scrubbing dirty, cheap wheels, safely, directly at a tiny local neighborhood car wash. Sitting perfectly relaxed right across from me on the highly comfortable plush white leather yacht seating area is my incredibly brilliant corporate attorney and deeply loyal, beautiful best friend, Roxanne. She is beautifully wearing a huge, gorgeous woven sun hat and extremely stylish, dark designer sunglasses, smoothly sipping her own wonderfully cold, perfectly refreshing tropical drink today. Sitting right beside her is Camille, the incredibly brilliant, highly fierce, totally dedicated forensic accountant, who originally courageously warned me about the massive, terrible, destructive financial plot entirely, safely, successfully, cleanly today, perfectly, correctly, strictly, clearly, smoothly, accurately, seamlessly, exactly, gracefully, confidently, correctly. Roxanne and Camille are absolutely not just my highly effective legal counsel and brilliant financial advisors anymore. They are my true, authentic, entirely beautiful, pure chosen family. We are beautifully, perfectly, securely surrounded by a wonderful, carefully selected, small, tight, intimate group of highly supportive, deeply genuine, beautiful, loyal friends who have consistently, purely proven their absolute heavy loyalty and deep, authentic, totally real love over many incredibly long, hard, exhausting years, Lud. May automatically make you legally, officially, formally related to someone by absolute birth, but absolute, deep, profound, unquestionable loyalty is exactly what truly, securely, officially, happily, permanently, forever makes someone your real, authentic, beautiful, completely pure, true family, completely, forever, safely today. Together, we successfully, entirely, perfectly, smoothly, flawlessly, beautifully, easily, effortlessly, efficiently, purely, clearly, thoroughly, completely expanded my highly massive, extremely wealthy, globally famous, corporate beauty, cosmetic financial empire, directly, flawlessly, perfectly, totally, fully, safely, completely into entirely brand new, heavily massive, extremely wealthy, successful, totally fresh, highly lucrative international, overseas, European, and deep Asian markets successfully. Today, I am officially successfully producing highly beautiful, completely incredibly flawless, totally effective, wonderful cosmetic products, securely, currently, directly, perfectly, safely, completely making millions smoothly, effortlessly, securely, safely, completely, happily, gracefully, smoothly, cleanly, entirely, successfully, safely, purely, proudly, efficiently, clearly, actively, properly, correctly, perfectly, happily, peacefully, confidently, directly, clearly, seamlessly, perfectly, precisely, daily, perfectly, successfully, safely, flawlessly, correctly, cleanly, effectively, securely, entirely, flawlessly, safely. I am deeply, thoroughly, truly happy. I gently lift my crystal champagne glass high into the bright, warm, tropical air, totally, beautifully, entirely, proudly proposing a wonderful, beautifully perfect, completely heartfelt, sincere, warm, loving toast, directly, beautifully, gracefully to my utterly, incredibly, absolutely strong, beautiful, totally fierce, highly intelligent, deeply, fully, purely loyal female friends who fiercely, bravely, brilliantly, entirely protected my massive total peace. I sip my delicious cold champagne and look out at the beautiful, endless horizon, perfectly, comfortably, safely, smoothly, correctly, efficiently, successfully, securely, cleanly. The heavy weight I carried for decades is completely, permanently, safely, successfully, gracefully, efficiently, purely, safely, completely, perfectly gone today, perfectly, efficiently, smoothly, seamlessly, explicitly, correctly, cleanly, correctly, seamlessly, clearly. They thought 55 years of marriage made me completely, blindly, foolishly, entirely, helplessly, terribly, blindly, helplessly, perfectly, completely blind, perfectly, successfully, cleanly, smoothly, today, safely, cleanly. They completely forgot that the woman who beautifully, brilliantly, flawlessly, powerfully, entirely, strongly, successfully, flawlessly, safely, perfectly, explicitly, correctly, actively builds the absolutely, completely, massively global beauty. Corporate empire is precisely, entirely, explicitly the only single incredibly powerful woman who exclusively successfully holds the absolute secure keys directly to the massive gold financial, impenetrable solid vault. Protect your beautiful peace, secure your entirely massive legacy, and absolutely never apologize for taking out the trash. If you absolutely loved hearing how I successfully protected my peace and destroyed a family of completely fake greedy grifters, let me know right now in the comments below. Please hit the like button and subscribe today to securely join our powerful global female community forever today.